Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a historical tale that's as wild as it is intriguing. The Hellfire Club. You probably won't survive this journey, at least not without raising an eyebrow or two. We're talking about a group of some of Britain's most powerful men indulging in secret orgies, satanic rituals and unchecked debauchery, all behind closed doors. Sounds like the stuff of legend, right? Well, it's all true, with just a few added mysteries. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Oh, and drop me a comment with your city and time. It's always cool to know who's hanging out with me as we explore the past together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Hellfire Club. Its very name rings with dark allure. It's a story drenched in the forbidden, where the elite of British society exchanged the lofty heights of privilege for the depths of secrecy and indulgence. But how did this infamous club come about? Who were these shadowy figures, and what made them think they could get away with such outrageous behaviour? Let's take a step back to understand where it all began. The Hellfire Club traces its roots to the early 18th century, but it wasn't born out of a simple desire for rebellion. No, its foundation was more personal, driven by the ambitions of one man, Sir Francis Dashwood. You see, Dashwood wasn't just any gentleman of the period. He was a wealthy landowner with a taste for the dramatic. His fortune, family connections and charisma allowed him to rise within the upper crust of British society, but his desires were anything but typical of his class. He wasn't interested in merely rubbing elbows with the aristocracy, or basking in the company of polite society. Dashwood, it seems, wanted to break every social convention imaginable, and that desire culminated in the creation of the Hellfire Club. As it turns out, Sir Francis Dashwood was more than a charming socialite. He was a man with a certain vision. His vision wasn't just about organising grand banquets or attending balls, it was about indulging in the very excesses that society deemed immoral, taboo, or downright sinful. Dashwood wanted to create a space for like-minded individuals, people who shared his desire to flout tradition and embrace the wildest forms of pleasure and exploration. This wasn't just about being an average partygoer, it was about delving deep into the realms of secrecy, power, and indulgence. So, in 1719, Sir Francis Dashwood, alongside his wealthy friends and confidants, established the first incarnation of the Hellfire Club. The club, with its blend of eccentricity and hedonism, quickly attracted the attention of many in the higher echelons of British society. It wasn't just about lavish gatherings and revelry, it was an exclusive society where the boundaries of morality were stretched to their breaking point. Membership was reserved for those who could afford both the financial cost and the risk to their reputations. The Hellfire Club, from the very start, was a secret society, a place where the elite could indulge in their deepest desires without fear of scandal. In fact, the more scandalous the better. But why the hellfire part? Well, this was a bit of a clever twist on the cultural climate of the time. You see, the 18th century was a period of religious fervour, particularly in Britain, where Christianity was at the heart of everything. The idea of hellfire immediately conjured up notions of damnation, sin, and temptation, all of which played perfectly into the club's ethos of rebellion. The name itself was an invitation to break free from the shackles of traditional morality, and it did so with a devilish wink. However, it wasn't all just fun and games. For all its intrigue and allure, the Hellfire Club was seen by many as dangerous. To the outside world, these men, surrounded by wealth and power, were openly mocking the very institutions that had held society together for centuries, particularly religion. The secrecy of the club only fueled rumours, with some claiming that the members were engaging in actual devil worship or performing satanic rituals. Was it true? Well, maybe not in the most literal sense. But as we'll see, the Hellfire Club wasn't afraid to dabble in the mystical and the forbidden, pushing the boundaries of what was socially acceptable. At its peak, the Hellfire Club wasn't just a gathering of libertines, it was a symbol of excess, rebellion and social commentary. It was a club where people of power and influence could release their most primal urges without any fear of reprisal. In the next sections, we'll explore just who made up this club, the kind of people who are willing to risk everything to attend these secret gatherings, and what they really got up to behind those closed doors. The Hellfire Club wasn't just some group of bored aristocrats looking for a good time, It was an exclusive club filled with some of the most powerful and influential men of the time. But who exactly were these individuals who dared to entertain such outrageous behaviour? The membership list of the Hellfire Club reads like a who's who of British society, a roll call of men who held great influence in both the political and social spheres. These weren't just any wealthy individuals, they were men who had the means to live outside the boundaries of societal norms and the audacity to push those limits to their breaking point. At the heart of the club was, of course, Sir Francis Dashwood, but Dashwood wasn't alone in his pursuit of excess and rebellion. He was joined by a select group of men who shared his ideals. One of the most notable members was the first Earl of Sandwich, John Montague, a man whose name is forever linked to the famous sandwich. Yes, that sandwich. But Montague wasn't just about food. He was also a notorious libertine, whose involvement with the Hellfire Club further fueled the rumours of the club's scandalous activities. His participation in the club exemplified its core appeal, a chance for men of power to engage in a lifestyle of hedonism with impunity. Then there was Thomas Pitt, a prominent politician who came from a powerful family, as well as other influential figures like William Hogarth, the famous satirist and painter. Hogarth was known for his sharp social critiques, which made him a fitting member of a group that enjoyed challenging the moral standards of the day. These individuals, like Dashwood, were already deeply embedded in British society, so their participation in a club that flaunted so many taboos added an extra layer of audacity to the whole affair. But what exactly were these men seeking in the Hellfire Club? Was it just about seeking thrills and breaking rules, or was there something more to it? The members of the Hellfire Club weren't simply indulging in drunken revelries for the sake of indulgence alone. They were also engaging in something deeper, something almost philosophical. For them, the club was a symbol of liberation, a space where they could publicly reject the authority of religion, government, and societal expectations. Many of the club's members were highly educated men, often philosophers and intellectuals who enjoyed pushing boundaries not just in behaviour, but in ideas as well. They saw themselves as free thinkers, rebels who resisted the oppressive forces of tradition and morality. And to some extent the club provided them with a safe space to live out their radical ideals without fear of judgment. However, while some members were intellectuals, others were more interested in the carnal pleasures the club had to offer. The Hellfire Club was infamous for its debauchery, with rumours of drunken orgies, sexual libertinism, and even mock satanic rituals. It was a space where men could indulge in their most indulgent taboo desires, often in the company of similarly wealthy and powerful individuals. And yet, even as the club's membership grew, so too did the secrecy surrounding its activities. The more outrageous the tales became, the more powerful the club's mystique grew, making it an even more attractive destination for those seeking to engage in such illicit pleasures. What's interesting is how the club's activities were often as intellectual as they were hedonistic. Many of the Hellfire Club's members, despite their thirst for excess, were deeply entrenched in political life, literature, and intellectual movements of the time. They weren't just attending these gatherings for the hedonistic pleasures. They were also engaged in discussions about philosophy, religion, and politics. But these were not your average philosophical debates. No, these were discussions wrapped in a thin veil of rebellion, designed to challenge the very institutions that governed their lives. At times, the club's meetings took on an almost theatrical quality. Some members would don costumes, others would engage in mock religious rituals, and still more would enact absurd plays that mocked the serious institutions of the time. For example, the club was known for staging mock religious ceremonies, where the roles of priest and worshippers were reversed, and where the sacred rituals of Christianity were parodied. It was as if the Hellfire Club members were seeking to turn the traditional world upside down, to subvert the very structures that society held dear. But despite its intellectual leanings and its more theatrical flourishes, there was no denying the club's primary draw, indulgence in the most extreme forms of pleasure. Whether that pleasure was physical, emotional, or intellectual, the Hellfire Club provided a space for its members to experience it without consequence. For those who could afford to join, those who had the wealth, status, and audacity, there was almost no limit to what was possible. And while the club might have been a place for intellectuals, artists, and politicians to gather, it was also a haven for indulgence in its rawest form. There were whispered rumours about the wildest excesses, but who could say where truth ended and myth began? The allure of such a place wasn't just in the freedom it offered, but in the social power it provided. Being a member of the Hellfire Club wasn't just about getting away with forbidden pleasures, it was also a statement. It was a way of signalling that you were untouchable, that you were above the moral constraints that bound lesser individuals. But while the club's power and mystery were undeniable, so too were the risks. Members played a dangerous game, and the consequences of their actions would eventually catch up with them. As the Hellfire Club's reputation grew, so did the rumours surrounding its activities. What exactly went down behind the club's doors? Well, that's where the story gets really interesting. The Hellfire Club wasn't just an elite drinking club or a place for intellectual debate. It was an environment of decadent indulgence, where the members let loose in ways that were shocking, even for the time. It was an escape from the heavy burden of societal expectations, a haven for the powerful to act without inhibition or remorse. The club's meetings were notorious for their wild, often grotesque rituals, many of which blurred the line between mockery and genuine reverence for the taboo. To outsiders, these activities seemed like the stuff of legend. Devilish rituals, orgies, and drunken revelry in equal measure. For the members, however, it was just a typical evening spent in the company of those who shared their appetite for chaos. The gatherings were centred in a series of hidden locations, most notably the Hellfire Caves in West Wickham, which Dashwood had personally transformed into a place of excess and ritual. These caves, carved into the hillside, were said to be as mysterious as they were unsettling. Dark, winding passages led to a large chamber where the most bizarre and decadent acts took place. Inside the caves, members of the Hellfire Club engaged in ceremonies that were equal parts mockery and ritual. According to rumours, some members would dress in priestly robes, while others donned devilish costumes, complete with horns and tails. The ceremonies, though often far from serious, were seen as a parody of traditional religious practices, mocking the power of the Church and God. In many ways, these mock rituals served as an expression of the members' disdain for authority, particularly religious authority. It was a way for them to say, "We are above your rules, your laws, and your beliefs." But while these ceremonies were certainly theatrical, they weren't just for show. They were part of a larger philosophy, one that questioned the very foundations of society, religion, and morality. In this space, there were no rules except the ones the members chose to create for themselves. Of course, it wasn't just about rituals. The Hellfire Club was also infamous for its sexual escapades, which were a key part of the club's activities. Members indulged in the type of hedonistic pleasures that only the extremely wealthy and powerful could afford. Orgies, casual affairs, and illicit sexual liaisons were commonplace. These indulgences were seen as acts of rebellion against a society that was deeply conservative and prudish about such matters. For the men of the Hellfire Club, the sexual freedom they enjoyed was another way of showing their contempt for the rules that governed ordinary people. And, as with the rituals, the boundaries of what was acceptable were pushed further and further with each meeting. But not all members were interested solely in the physical indulgence that the club offered. Some were more concerned with the intellectual aspects of the group, using the club as a space to engage in debates, challenge social norms, and explore controversial ideas. The Hellfire Club wasn't merely about indulgence, it was also a space where members could voice their most radical thoughts without fear of retribution. This combination of intellectualism and excess made the club particularly attractive to those who wanted to escape the constraints of polite society and explore the fringes of thought and behaviour. After all, who could argue with a group of powerful men who were willing to break every taboo, both socially and intellectually? But even with all the secrecy, there were still those who couldn't help but wonder if the Hellfire Club's wild activities went too far. Rumours of the most bizarre and immoral acts spread like wildfire through London's upper circles, and soon enough, the club's name became synonymous with scandal. The public, always eager for a juicy story about the excesses of the rich and powerful, feasted on the rumours, fueling the mystique of the Hellfire Club. Some reports even suggested that members engaged in devil worship, believing that their indulgence in every kind of sin was a form of worship to the dark forces they so frequently mocked. Was there any truth to these rumours? It's unclear. What is clear, however, is that the Hellfire Club wasn't merely playing at rebellion. It was challenging every societal norm, including the sacred notions of good and evil. The allure of the Hellfire Club lay in its very exclusivity and the mystery surrounding its activities. The more the public speculated, the more the club's reputation grew. For the members, it became not just about engaging in taboo activities, but about creating a space that was utterly free from the prying eyes of society. The club was a fortress of secrets, one where the usual rules didn't apply, and where the members could truly let their hair down without fear of scandal. In many ways, the Hellfire Club was a perfect reflection of the growing sentiment in Britain during the 18th century, a desire to break away from traditional authority and embrace a new form of freedom, one that was as indulgent and debauched as it was intellectual. However, as with all things that challenged the status quo, the Hellfire Club couldn't remain hidden forever. Its activities, both intellectual and hedonistic, started to draw the attention of outsiders, including the church, which was increasingly alarmed by the club's blatant defiance of religious authority. And as the whispers grew louder, so too did the pressures to bring an end to this notorious club of the rich and powerful. The Hellfire Club had already made waves throughout London, but as it continued to push boundaries and draw public ire, the end of its reign seemed inevitable. As the Hellfire Club's reputation for debauchery and intellectual rebellion reached its peak, so too did the attention it drew from the wider public. The secretive nature of the club made it all the more tantalising for those on the outside looking in. Scandals swirled around the club's activities, and its very existence became a challenge to the established order. The aristocracy had never been so open in their defiance of social and religious norms, and this audacity caught the eye of some of the most powerful institutions in Britain, the church, the government, and even rival social groups who sought to undermine the Hellfire Club's influence. The church, in particular, was not impressed. The members of the Hellfire Club were openly mocking Christianity and religious traditions, using their gatherings as opportunities to ridicule what many considered sacred. The idea of wealthy, powerful men participating in mock satanic rituals and sexual excesses was a direct affront to everything the church stood for. The clergy's outrage was palpable, and they were eager to see the Hellfire Club dismantled. These religious figures worked hard to portray the club as a den of sin, equating it with the most depraved forms of satanic worship and vilifying its members as agents of corruption. The church's response to the club was both moral and political. By attacking the Hellfire Club, they were also making a statement about their own authority and the need to protect the moral fabric of British society. But the church wasn't the only institution alarmed by the Hellfire Club's existence. The British government, which had long held an uneasy relationship with the aristocracy, was also wary of a group that so openly flaunted the rules of society. Members of the Hellfire Club were influential in politics, and their willingness to engage in subversive activities made them an easy target for those seeking to maintain order. The government feared that the club's behaviour could serve as a model for others, particularly among the younger, more radical members of the elite who were growing increasingly disillusioned with the established order. The activities of the Hellfire Club, with its lavish feasts and mock rituals, seemed to mock not only the church but the very foundations of British government itself. Despite the growing backlash, the Hellfire Club continued to thrive in its heyday, largely because it remained shrouded in secrecy. Its members knew how to protect their identities, ensuring that their most extreme actions stayed hidden from the prying eyes of the public. However, as more rumours and scandals spread, the pressures from both the church and the government intensified. In the end, it wasn't any one particular scandal that led to the Hellfire Club's downfall, it was the increasing scrutiny and the growing unpopularity of its members. The public's fascination with the club eventually gave way to moral outrage, and those who had once proudly flaunted their membership began to distance themselves from the group. Sir Francis Dashwood, the man who had founded the Hellfire Club, was eventually forced to step back from the limelight. Although he was instrumental in the club's formation, Dashwood could no longer protect it from the growing tide of public dissent. His own political career began to suffer as well. By the 1740s, the Hellfire Club had begun to disband, largely due to the increasing pressure from both public opinion and the authorities. Dashwood's downfall was a symbolic one, representing the decline of the club itself. As the society grew less tolerant of its excesses, those who had once revelled in its outrageous pleasures saw that their actions had consequences, even for those as powerful as they were. Interestingly, though, the dissolution of the Hellfire Club didn't entirely spell the end of its influence. The club's activities left a lasting mark on the cultural imagination, fueling the ongoing myth of secret societies and underground gatherings of the elite. While the club itself disbanded, the allure of such organisations, where, Society's rules could be bent or even broken entirely, didn't vanish. Instead, it transformed, inspiring future generations to seek out the darker corners of society, places where privilege and power could still be exercised without constraint. The fascination with the Hellfire Club also continued in the art and literature of the period. Writers like Voltaire and satirists like Hogarth, a member of the Hellfire Club himself, used the club as a symbol of excess and hypocrisy. In their works, the club became a metaphor for the moral decay that seemed to be creeping into the fabric of British society. The Hellfire Club was no longer just a meeting place for debauched aristocrats. It had become a symbol of the times, embodying the contradictions and tensions of an increasingly complex and fractured society. The club's decline in the mid-18th century didn't necessarily mark the end of secretive gatherings of the elite, though. Throughout history, the idea of exclusive clubs, hidden societies, and underground networks of power would continue to emerge. While the Hellfire Club may have fallen into obscurity, its legacy lived on in the mythology it inspired, in the works of art it influenced, and in the idea of the secret forbidden world that has always captured the imagination of the public. So, what was the legacy of the Hellfire Club? Was it simply a footnote in history, a brief moment in time where the aristocracy flaunted its wealth and power in ways that made society uncomfortable? Or was it something more, an enduring symbol of the tension between freedom and morality, privilege and accountability? What is clear is that the Hellfire Club left a mark on history that we can still see today. Whether as a cautionary tale or a symbol of rebellion, the Hellfire Club will always be remembered as one of the most audacious experiments in the pursuit of unchecked indulgence. The decline of the Hellfire Club might have seemed like the end of an era, but its shadow loomed large long after its disbandment. The legacy of the club would resonate in the centuries that followed, fueling a fascination with secret societies, indulgence, and rebellion against societal norms. Even though the Hellfire Club officially dissolved by the 1740s, it had left behind an indelible mark on both British society and the wider cultural consciousness. Its mix of intellectual radicalism, sexual liberation, and public mockery of authority was a unique blend that few could ignore, and it inspired numerous imitations and echoes in the years to come. While the Hellfire Club's most scandalous actions were, at least in part, driven by a desire to challenge the strictures of religion and government, its influence also extended into more subtle realms. For the intellectuals and artists involved, the club wasn't just a space for hedonism, it was a fertile ground for political and philosophical experimentation. Many of the club's members, despite their more lascivious pursuits, were also thinkers and writers who grappled with the dominant ideas of the day. The Hellfire Club's members were part of a broader intellectual movement that sought to question established truths, whether those truths were about religion, government, or the very nature of society. As the Enlightenment began to take hold in Europe, many of the club's members were aligned with ideas of reason, individual liberty, and skepticism toward authority. In the years following its collapse, some of the philosophical and political ideals expressed within the Hellfire Club found their way into more mainstream discourse. The club's members had often satirized the rigid structures of British society, from the monarchy to the church to the aristocracy itself. These ideas would later take on new life as the Age of Revolution unfolded across Europe and America. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Hellfire Club's legacy is the idea of rebellion, not just as an act of defiance against authority, but as a pursuit of personal freedom at any cost. In a world that was rapidly changing, the Hellfire Club's audacity served as a reminder that some were willing to challenge every boundary in the name of pleasure and freedom. Of course, the most enduring legacy of the Hellfire Club is its place in popular culture. Over the years, the club has been immortalised in literature, art, and even modern media, often depicted as a symbol of excess, secrecy, and moral decay. The idea of a secret society composed of the most powerful and debauched members of society has continued to fascinate writers, filmmakers, and artists. The club's mythology is alive and well in modern-day depictions of secret societies, from movies about conspiracies and dark rituals to novels exploring forbidden pleasures and hidden cabals. The Hellfire Club has become a sort of archetype, representing all the things that people love to speculate about but rarely talk about openly: unchecked power, forbidden indulgence, and the sense that there is always something lurking just beneath the surface of polite society. One of the more interesting aspects of the Hellfire Club's enduring popularity in modern culture is the way it has become intertwined with the idea of forbidden knowledge. Secret societies have long been a staple of intrigue, with their hidden rituals and shadowy members, whether it's the Freemasons, the Illuminati, or countless fictional organisations. The allure of secret knowledge, of being part of a select few who understand the world's most hidden truths, has always captivated the public imagination. The Hellfire Club, with its blend of intellectualism and debauchery, fits perfectly into this tradition. In the public mind, the Hellfire Club has come to symbolise the very essence of forbidden knowledge, the idea that power, wealth and knowledge can all be wielded together in secret, hidden from the world. Interestingly, the Hellfire Club has even found its way into the world of popular fiction, particularly in genres like horror and gothic literature. The club's alleged association with satanic rituals, dark magic and the occult has made it a natural fit for stories that explore the supernatural. Its portrayal in these settings often blends historical facts with the darkest aspects of the club's mythology, presenting it as a shadowy organisation involved in sinister dealings and arcane rituals. This portrayal has been further cemented by modern films and television shows that tap into the fascination with secretive, morally ambiguous organisations. Whether in the pages of a gothic novel or as part of a plot in a psychological thriller, the Hellfire Club continues to serve as a shorthand for all that is mysterious, forbidden, and dangerous. In addition to its literary legacy, the Hellfire Club's influence has also been felt in real-world secret societies and clubs. While there may not be any organisations directly descended from the Hellfire Club, there is no shortage of groups that have claimed the mantle of secrecy and indulgence. These modern Hellfire Clubs exist, often as underground gatherings where the elite can indulge in the kind of freedom that was once only available to the members of Dashwood's notorious society. Some of these modern groups embrace the same spirit of rebellion and excess, while others simply use the name for the allure of the mystery and glamour that surrounds it. In fact, the idea of Hellfire Clubs persists in the modern era, with some groups continuing to meet in private and engage in activities that might seem familiar to the debauched revellers of the 18th century. While the original Hellfire Club's overtly political aims may no longer be relevant in the same way, the spirit of exclusivity, secrecy and indulgence is alive and well in the world of elite clubs and secret societies. The world today is still full of individuals and groups who crave the kind of freedom that only a few select people can experience, and the Hellfire Club, in all its excess and rebellion, will always remain a symbol of that freedom. As we've seen, the story of the Hellfire Club is one of excess, mystery, and the pursuit of freedom at any cost. It was a place where the powerful, the rich, and the influential could come together to break every rule and indulge in every forbidden pleasure. And while the club itself may be long gone, its legacy continues to haunt our imaginations. The Hellfire Club remains a symbol of the tension between societal order and personal liberty, a reminder of the power of secrecy, and an enduring icon of the human desire to push beyond the boundaries of the ordinary. As the legend of the Hellfire Club continued to reverberate through history, its influence spread far beyond its immediate circle. Over the centuries, the idea of a secret society composed of powerful men, each of them willing to subvert societal norms in pursuit of personal pleasure, became a potent cultural symbol. The Hellfire Club, with its mixture of intellectualism, debauchery and anti-establishment sentiment, planted the seeds for a lasting fascination with secret organisations and elite gatherings that have continued to thrive, both in real life and in the pages of books and screens of film. In the 19th and 20th centuries, writers and artists began to revisit the Hellfire Club, taking its core themes and weaving them into works that explored the darker side of human nature. Many saw the Hellfire Club as emblematic of the excesses of the aristocracy, who, in the face of social upheaval, could retreat into their own insular worlds, indulging in pleasures that were beyond the reach of ordinary people. The allure of these secretive organisations with their whispered rituals and hidden pleasures became a powerful metaphor for the perceived disconnect between the ruling class and the masses. These societies, whether real or fictional, suggested that beneath the polished veneer of society's most powerful figures lay a darkness, an untamed hunger for freedom, pleasure, and power that could not be easily contained. One of the most enduring aspects of the Hellfire Club's influence is its connection to the rise of Gothic literature and horror. Writers such as Mary Shelley, Bram Stoker, and Edgar Allan Poe were all influenced by the themes of secrecy, forbidden knowledge, and the subversion of religious and moral authority that the Hellfire Club embodied. In many of their works, secret societies and shadowy figures who indulge in occult practices or dark rituals became central motifs. The Hellfire Club's association with satanic worship, though likely more myth than reality, only added fuel to the fire of these stories, inspiring tales of madness, corruption, and the supernatural. The club's legend, particularly its supposed involvement in satanic rites, also lent itself to the rise of occultism and esoteric traditions in the 19th century. Figures like Aleister Crowley, who became infamous for his own experiments with the occult, would later emerge in a world that had been primed by the Hellfire Club's mythology. Crowley, for instance, embraced the idea of seeking hidden, often forbidden knowledge, much in the same way that the Hellfire Club members had once done. While Crowley was not directly associated with the club, his interest in secret rituals and mysticism mirrored the Hellfire Club's ethos. Both represented a desire to transcend ordinary existence and reach beyond the confines of accepted moral and societal structures. The fascination with the Hellfire Club also found expression in early 20th century art and music. Artists who were drawn to the countercultural movements of the period often cited the club as a symbol of rebellion and subversion. In the era of the modernist avant-garde, the idea of subverting societal norms, whether through sexual freedom, intellectual exploration, or political upheaval, became a dominant theme. The Hellfire Club, with its indulgence in the taboo, represented the perfect emblem of this spirit. In fact, its symbolism was so powerful that it began to transcend the limits of historical fact, morphing into an idealized version of rebellion and freedom from authority. This cultural obsession with secret societies and elite clubs has persisted into the 21st century. The Hellfire Club is now firmly ensconced in popular culture, appearing in books, movies, and TV shows as a symbol of everything that is forbidden, dangerous, and alluring. Perhaps one of the most famous modern references to the Hellfire Club can be found in the world of comic books and film. In the Marvel Universe, the Hellfire Club is portrayed as a powerful secret society of wealthy elites who indulge in both political manipulation and decadent pleasures. It appears as both a literal and metaphorical embodiment of the dangers of unchecked power and hedonism. The club's secretive nature and its notorious members have made it a compelling story element in both mainstream superhero stories and darker, more mature narratives. Even beyond the realm of fiction, the notion of Hellfire Clubs or similar elite societies continues to captivate the public imagination. Some modern-day groups and clubs, often associated with high society wealth and power, have been compared to the Hellfire Club. While not directly modelled on the 18th century group, these organisations often draw on the allure of secrecy, exclusivity, and indulgence. Members of these groups may not be holding mock satanic rituals or indulging in the same wild excesses as the original Hellfire Club, but they still represent a privileged few who can afford to live outside the boundaries that govern most people's lives. These modern-day Hellfire Clubs continue to evoke the idea of a hidden world where rules are bent, where power is exercised in secret, and where pleasure is pursued without shame. At its heart, the Hellfire Club was more than just a gathering of the wealthy and the powerful. It was a symbol of human desire to break free from the constraints imposed by society. The club's members, for all their excess, were ultimately engaging in an act of rebellion against the structures that governed their lives. And in doing so, they became part of a much larger cultural movement, a movement that sought to question authority, explore new ideas, and embrace the wildest forms of freedom. Whether they were genuinely seeking to subvert religious authority or simply enjoying a moment of indulgence, the Hellfire Club members embodied a spirit of liberation that resonates to this day. The enduring fascination with the Hellfire Club speaks to something deeper in human nature, a desire to escape the ordinary and experience the forbidden. It's a testament to the fact that no matter how far we come in terms of societal progress, there will always be a part of us that yearns for the kind of freedom the Hellfire Club represented. And that perhaps is why the club's legend continues to captivate us, long after its doors were closed and its secrets buried. The idea of a place where anything goes, where the rules don't apply, and where the most powerful and elite can come together to indulge in their deepest desires, well, it's a temptation that even the most civilized of us can't resist. By the time the Hellfire Club began to fade into history, its reputation had already transcended its physical existence. It had become a myth, an alluring, scandalous tale that captured the imagination of not only the British public, but also those beyond the shores of Britain. Its legacy was a strange cocktail of myth, intrigue, and the irresistible allure of taboo. But for all the talk of debauchery and mock satanic rituals, the Hellfire Club was also a representation of an evolving cultural landscape, one where intellectuals, artists, and aristocrats were increasingly questioning authority and embracing a more radical form of personal liberty. Though the club's physical meetings ceased, the ideological undercurrent it helped to foster continued to shape the intellectual and political world. It was during the time of the Hellfire Club's brief existence that the Enlightenment movement truly began to take hold in Europe. Philosophers like Voltaire, Rousseau, and Hume were challenging traditional notions of religion, government, and the nature of humanity. The Hellfire Club, while not directly part of the Enlightenment, was certainly a part of the intellectual ferment that characterized the period. Its rejection of conventional moral authority and embrace of personal freedom were ideas that resonated with the larger cultural shifts of the time. Interestingly, the Hellfire Club wasn't just about rejecting authority. It was also about creating a new kind of social order, one built on personal freedom and indulgence. This idea of creating one's own rules, a hallmark of the club's ethos, found its way into the burgeoning ideas of individual rights and personal liberty that would later fuel revolutions across the globe. While the Hellfire Club was by no means a political movement, its members, in their embrace of freedom from social constraints, contributed to a broader conversation about what it meant to live in a society where the individual could claim more autonomy. This intertwining of intellectual pursuits with unchecked indulgence in the club's activities speaks to the complexity of the Hellfire Club's legacy. Its members were not simply engaging in sexual excess or performing mock religious rites. They were also participating in an intellectual rebellion against the social and political structures that had defined their world for centuries. The very nature of their membership was a statement, an act of subversion not just against religion, but against the established order of the ruling class itself. The Hellfire Club was an embodiment of the tension between tradition and modernity, between the old world and the new. It provided a space where the most powerful individuals in British society could engage in activities that contradicted the very foundations of that society, all while remaining insulated from the consequences of their actions. What makes the Hellfire Club so fascinating today, however, is its continued allure. The idea of an exclusive society where members can partake in the most forbidden pleasures without fear of repercussion speaks to something deep within the human psyche, a desire for freedom unbound by convention or law. Even as society has evolved and the rules have changed, the fundamental desire to experience life outside the boundaries of conventional morality has remained. For those who seek it, the Hellfire Club represents an idealized vision of what it means to live without restrictions, to embrace life in its most intense, unfettered form. The club's influence also extended into the realm of art. William Hogarth, one of the club's most famous members, became a sharp critic of society through his satirical art. His famous paintings, like A Rake's Progress and Marriage a la Mode, painted a picture of the excesses of the aristocracy and the moral decay of the upper class. His works often depicted the consequences of indulging in vice, but they were also a reflection of the time in which he lived, a time when the line between moral righteousness and indulgent rebellion was being increasingly blurred. Hogarth's art was a direct reflection of the world he inhabited, and the Hellfire Club, with its mixture of decadence and intellectualism, was central to that world. The Hellfire Club's influence on art and culture is still visible today, in the way we view secret societies and rebellious groups. Its mythology, centered around the ideas of subverting social norms, seeking forbidden pleasures, and mocking authority, has been an enduring source of inspiration for generations of artists, writers, and filmmakers. From the Gothic novels of the 19th century to the modern thrillers and horror films of today, the Hellfire Club's spirit of indulgence and secrecy has found its place in the popular imagination. Writers and filmmakers, seeking to explore the darker, more forbidden corners of society, continue to draw from the myth of the Hellfire Club, using its themes to fuel stories of intrigue, excess, and danger. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Hellfire Club's continued legacy is the way it has been reinterpreted over time. The club's original activities, wild orgies, mock rituals, and the rejection of social norms have been sensationalized and exaggerated, but the core idea of the Hellfire Club as a space where power, secrecy, and indulgence converge has remained constant. The modern Hellfire Club is no longer confined to the caves of West Wycombe or the halls of 18th century London. Today, it exists as a symbol, a representation of the deepest yearnings for freedom, pleasure, and power that persist in every society, no matter how much it tries to enforce its moral code. While the original Hellfire Club may have dissolved, its spirit of rebellion, secrecy, and the pursuit of personal liberty continues to influence modern culture. The idea that there are places in the world where the rules don't apply, where the elite gather to indulge in their most private desires, still resonates today. And as long as the allure of forbidden pleasure remains, the Hellfire Club's story will continue to captivate the imagination, reminding us of the deep tensions that exist between freedom and responsibility, power and accountability, and society's demands and personal desires. While the Hellfire Club's story may seem like a product of its time, the underlying themes it explored, rebellion, excess, and the defiance of social norms, are timeless. Even centuries after the club's dissolution, its legend continues to resonate in a society that constantly grapples with the balance between individual freedom and collective morality. In a world where elite circles often remain hidden from view, the fascination with secretive societies like the Hellfire Club remains as potent as ever. The idea of a group of powerful, influential people coming together to indulge in their deepest, darkest desires, free from the constraints of society, continues to captivate us. Perhaps one of the reasons why the Hellfire Club continues to intrigue is because it embodies a very human paradox, the desire for both power and liberation. Those who joined the Hellfire Club were in many ways at the height of their social and political influence. They were the elite, the ones who held sway over the future of the nation, yet they still sought more, something outside the ordinary, a space where they could challenge not only the norms of society, but the very nature of morality itself. It was as if their wealth and position, while providing them with every material luxury, could not satisfy their deeper cravings for freedom, excess, and subversion. In a way, the Hellfire Club's legacy asks a compelling question. When a person is granted all the comforts and privileges of the world, what is left for them to seek? What remains when the basic needs of life are fulfilled and one is free to indulge in every pleasure imaginable? The answer, perhaps, lies in the club's rebellious nature. The members of the Hellfire Club were not simply indulging for the sake of indulgence. They were engaging in a deeper rebellion against the very structures that had allowed them to accumulate power. Their actions were an assertion of their autonomy, a statement that they would not be bound by the same moral codes that governed ordinary society. This desire for unchecked freedom is not limited to the wealthy or the powerful. In fact, the allure of such rebellion is universal. Even today, there are those who long for a break from societal rules, who seek spaces where they can shed the burdens of convention and live without consequence. The Hellfire Club, with its mix of intellectualism, political rebellion, and sexual freedom, represents a kind of escape, an escape from the constraints that bind us all. And while the original club may no longer exist, its ideas continue to fuel our cultural imagination, whether in the form of fiction, film, or real-life secret societies. It's also important to recognise that the Hellfire Club, despite its notorious activities, wasn't purely about selfish indulgence. The intellectual component of the club was no less significant than its hedonistic pursuits. The members, many of whom were prominent politicians, philosophers, and writers, engaged in discussions that would have been considered radical at the time. They questioned the power structures that governed their society, critiquing both the government and the church. In this sense, the Hellfire Club was also an early example of intellectual rebellion, an attempt to break free from the established order and explore new ways of thinking. The club's members were, in many ways, pioneers of the ideas that would later fuel the Enlightenment, despite their more scandalous activities. This intellectual rebellion, paired with the club's decadent lifestyle, made it a particularly potent symbol of the tensions between personal liberty and societal expectations. The Hellfire Club's members were not simply rejecting morality for the sake of indulgence, they were also exploring what it meant to live in a society that placed such heavy emphasis on rules and religious teachings. In a world where social status and reputation were everything, the Hellfire Club offered its members a rare opportunity to escape from the constraints of public life and immerse themselves in a space where they could act according to their own desires, unencumbered by the judgments of society. Yet, for all its fascination and lure, the club's ultimate downfall serves as a reminder of the dangers inherent in seeking too much freedom. The intense secrecy and radical behaviour of the Hellfire Club attracted the attention of both the public and the authorities, which ultimately led to its demise. It wasn't just the church's disapproval or the moral outrage of the public that brought the club down. It was the very nature of its rebellion. The more the club flaunted its disregard for societal norms, the more it became a target for those who sought to maintain order. It's a sobering thought. While the Hellfire Club thrived on breaking rules, it was in the end undone by the very society it sought to defy. The Hellfire Club's legacy, then, is a complex one. On the one hand, it represents a utopian vision of freedom, where the boundaries of society are pushed, and individuals are free to explore their most forbidden desires. On the other hand, it serves as a cautionary tale, warning us of the dangers of unchecked rebellion, particularly when it involves the abuse of power. The Hellfire Club was, in essence, a microcosm of the larger human struggle between freedom and control, and in that sense, its story remains as relevant today as it was in the 18th century. One of the most lasting aspects of the Hellfire Club's mythology is how it taps into our collective fascination with secrets and the unknown. Throughout history, secret societies have held a certain allure, whether it's the Freemasons, the Illuminati, or groups that remain shrouded in mystery. The Hellfire Club, with its combination of intellectualism, power and indulgence, embodies the idea of a hidden world that exists just beneath the surface of polite society. It's a world where the rules don't apply, where the most powerful can indulge without fear of consequence, and where knowledge and pleasure are pursued without restraint. It's this idea, the notion of a hidden world of excess and forbidden knowledge, that continues to capture our imagination, long after the last of the club's members have passed into history. The Hellfire Club's legend, as a symbol of elite rebellion and indulgence, continues to resonate not just with those interested in history, but with anyone who has ever been captivated by the allure of the forbidden. Secret societies, whether they exist in reality or are the subject of mythology, have a magnetic pull on our collective imagination. The Hellfire Club, with its mix of intellectualism, hedonism and defiance, became an enduring symbol of the desire to live outside societal constraints, an aspiration that still lingers in the modern age. In today's world, secretive groups and exclusive clubs continue to hold a mystique. Whether it's the shadowy world of elite political and business circles, or underground gatherings that operate outside the law, the idea of the hidden society persists. We are still fascinated by the thought that there might be realms of power and pleasure operating beneath the surface of our everyday lives. The Hellfire Club, in this sense, laid the groundwork for the modern obsession with secretive organisations and their influence over society. Its mix of political power, intellectual exploration, and personal excess serves as a blueprint for how such groups are perceived, even today. In many ways, the Hellfire Club represents a yearning for freedom that many of us still feel. It's the idea that by breaking the rules, whether moral, societal, or political, we can access a deeper, more authentic part of ourselves. This desire to step outside the norms of society is something that appeals to the rebellious streak in many individuals. The Hellfire Club gave its members the freedom to act according to their own whims and desires, without concern for public opinion or religious condemnation. While the context of the 18th century was vastly different from today, this longing for liberation from the rules that govern our lives remains universal. The club's intellectual side also speaks to a deeper yearning for understanding and transcendence. The members of the Hellfire Club weren't just indulging in sexual excess, they were also challenging the prevailing intellectual and religious ideas of the day. The Hellfire Club offered a space where its members could explore radical ideas about freedom, about the power of the individual, and about the very structure of society. This combination of intellectual curiosity and personal indulgence created a dynamic that was both fascinating and dangerous. And though the club ultimately fell apart, the spirit of intellectual rebellion it embodied continued to influence the intellectual movements that followed, particularly during the Enlightenment and later, the Romantic period. But for all the intellectualism and radical ideas associated with the Hellfire Club, its reputation was ultimately defined by its decadent, often shocking behaviour. The idea that these influential men could gather in secret to engage in orgies, mock religious ceremonies, and flout societal norms was what most people found most compelling about the club. The Hellfire Club became synonymous with excess and immorality, and this, in many ways, became the defining aspect of its legacy. In modern times, this aspect of the club's activities is still what most people remember. Its association with taboo subjects like Satanism, sexual liberation, and rebellion against authority has kept it alive in public consciousness, especially as society continues to explore issues of power, morality, and freedom. The myth of the Hellfire Club, built largely on these extravagant tales of debauchery, has been spun into countless works of fiction. In books, films, and TV shows, the Hellfire Club appears as the ultimate symbol of forbidden knowledge and hidden power. In many modern depictions, the club is portrayed not just as a group of rebellious aristocrats, but as a sinister force, influencing the world from behind the scenes. These representations often exaggerate the club's more outrageous aspects, its satanic rituals, its unrestrained sexual behaviour, and its manipulations of political power. But in doing so, they tap into the deeper themes that made the club so compelling in the first place. Even in the 21st century, the fascination with groups like the Hellfire Club persists. We are drawn to the idea of a secret world that exists just beneath the surface of our own, one where the most powerful, most privileged, and most indulgent individuals can gather and act without limits. Whether it's the hidden world of the elite, or the imagined spaces of secret societies, the appeal remains the same, a desire to break free from the constraints of everyday life and explore the darker corners of power and pleasure. This continued fascination with secret societies and underground clubs is fueled by the very same elements that made the Hellfire Club so compelling. The idea of hidden knowledge, of a world where the rules don't apply, is something that continues to captivate us. It taps into our desire for freedom from authority and, in some cases, our darker impulses, those desires for excess, secrecy, and rebellion. And though the Hellfire Club may no longer exist, its myth is alive and well, continuing to influence the way we view power, pleasure, and the boundaries of social norms. In essence, the Hellfire Club represents an eternal tension, the push and pull between societal rules and the individual's desire for freedom. It serves as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration, offering a glimpse into a world where the constraints of morality and social order are discarded in favour of unchecked indulgence. The club's legacy endures because it touches on something timeless, the human need for both liberation and belonging, for both rebellion and intellect, and for the pursuit of pleasure in a world that often seeks to deny it. The Hellfire Club, in all its excess and complexity, will continue to haunt our imaginations because it represents both our greatest fears and our deepest desires. It's a symbol of the human tendency to push boundaries, to seek freedom, and to live without limits. And, as history has shown, when we look back at groups like the Hellfire Club, we are reminded of how the past, with all its indulgence and transgression, continues to shape the world we live in today. The story of the Hellfire Club is often told through the lens of scandal, excess, and rebellion. But what's often left out is the deeper, more philosophical undercurrent that drove many of its members. The group wasn't simply about indulging in hedonistic pleasures, or mocking the moral authorities of their time. It was, for some, a place to explore ideas of freedom, individualism, and intellectual autonomy. This intellectual aspect of the club often gets overshadowed by the more salacious stories of orgies and rituals, but it was, without question, a critical part of the club's appeal. In a time when intellectual freedom was still a dangerous pursuit, the Hellfire Club offered a space where radical ideas about religion, politics, and society could be debated, all while indulging in the most forbidden pleasures. At the heart of the Hellfire Club was a desire to challenge authority, whether religious, political, or societal, and to question the very structures that governed their lives. For the intellectuals involved, this wasn't just about rejection for the sake of rejection. It was a genuine attempt to carve out a space for free thought, away from the constraints of mainstream society. They wanted to explore alternative philosophies, challenge the strict dogmas of the church, and engage with new ideas about the rights of individuals, the nature of power, and the role of the state. This intellectual rebellion was particularly important during the 18th century when the Enlightenment was beginning to flourish in Europe. Thinkers like Voltaire and Rousseau were already pushing boundaries in terms of politics and religion, and the Hellfire Club mirrored this desire for a new, more liberated way of thinking. While the club's more infamous rituals may have overshadowed their philosophical pursuits, the fact that members were willing to embrace both intellectual and carnal freedom speaks to their radical worldview. And yet, for all the intellectual curiosity that the Hellfire Club encouraged, its members were not immune to the temptations of unchecked power. The club's reputation for debauchery, its lavish feasts, mock satanic rituals and sexual escapades became the defining characteristic of its legacy. It's easy to reduce the Hellfire Club to mere hedonism, but doing so misses the broader picture. The club was not just about enjoying life's pleasures. It was about flaunting societal conventions, defying moral constraints, and rejecting the very structures that upheld the status quo. Its members wanted to escape from the oppressive rules that bound them, and in doing so, they sought to experience a form of freedom that was, for them, both intellectual and physical. The clash between the club's intellectual pursuits and its indulgence in excess reflects a central paradox of human nature: our desire to push boundaries, even when those boundaries are necessary for societal cohesion. The Hellfire Club's activities also reveal a tension between the pursuit of pleasure and the responsibility that comes with power. The club's members were not poor, disenfranchised rebels fighting for a cause. They were wealthy, influential men who held power in society. In a way, their rebellion was an expression of their privilege. The wealthy were rarely subject to the same moral or legal constraints as the poor, and the Hellfire Club was a way for them to further exploit their power for personal gain. The idea that a group of aristocrats could gather in secret to mock religion and engage in forbidden acts was a stark reminder of the privileges that came with their status. But in the end, this unchecked freedom would be their undoing. The very things that made the Hellfire Club so intriguing, its disregard for social norms, its excess, its blatant disregard for authority, were also what made it dangerous. The backlash against the club grew stronger as more people began to see it, not as a symbol of intellectual freedom, but as an example of the moral decay of the ruling class. The public's perception of the Hellfire Club shifted from curiosity to outrage, and it was this moral outrage, fueled by the church and the government, that ultimately contributed to its decline. The fall of the Hellfire Club is a cautionary tale about the limits of rebellion. The club's members sought freedom, but in their pursuit of freedom from societal constraints, they overlooked the fact that true freedom requires responsibility. The Hellfire Club was a place where the powerful could do as they pleased, but in the end, their unchecked indulgence in excess made them vulnerable. Power, when left unchecked, can lead to moral and social decay, and this is where the club story becomes a warning. No matter how free we may feel, the consequences of our actions eventually catch up with us. Despite the club's decline, its legacy continues to shape how we view secrecy, power, and rebellion. The idea of a hidden world where the powerful live by their own rules continues to captivate us. Secret societies, elitism, and rebellion remain central themes in both literature and real life. The Hellfire Club's allure lies in its mixture of intellectualism, freedom, and indulgence, a combination that remains as tantalizing today as it was in the 18th century. Its members, in their pursuit of ultimate freedom, created a society that was both an intellectual experiment and a playground for the rich and powerful. Today, we still grapple with the same tensions the Hellfire Club highlighted. We live in a world that is increasingly divided by wealth and power, where secretive organizations and the elite continue to exert influence behind closed doors. The Hellfire Club, as a symbol of that hidden world, reminds us that power and indulgence are often intertwined. It's a world where the rules don't apply, where the privileged can get away with things the rest of us can only dream of. And while the club itself may no longer exist, the idea of living beyond society's constraints, of having access to a hidden world of pleasure, knowledge, and power, remains as alluring as ever. As much as the Hellfire Club was about rebellion and defiance, it was also a place where the members could indulge in a sense of immortality. In a society that demanded conformity, the Hellfire Club offered an escape, a chance to live without fear, to act without consequence, and to experience life in its most extreme form. Whether they were seeking intellectual liberation, sexual freedom, or simply a break from the responsibilities that came with their power, the Hellfire Club offered a space for indulgence that still captures our imagination today. The club's legacy, in all its complexity, continues to haunt us because it speaks to the deepest, most universal desires of the human experience, the quest for freedom, power, and pleasure. As the years passed, the Hellfire Club's myth grew, transforming from a short-lived gathering of rebellious aristocrats into a symbol of society's deepest taboos, forbidden knowledge, and the ever-elusive quest for freedom. The very idea that such a group of men, intellectually driven yet indulging in decadence, could exist in the heart of a society as rigid and rule-bound as 18th century Britain is part of the reason why the club's legend has persisted. It's a reflection of the timeless human desire to break free from the chains of tradition, to explore the darker aspects of life, and to question the systems that govern our existence. The club's existence was a subtle, yet powerful reminder that, beneath the layers of civility and social decorum, lies a complex web of desires and impulses, some of which are better left hidden. Even as the club dissolved and its members returned to their lives in the public eye, the whispers about its activities did not fade. The club had done more than just scandalise society. It had left behind a legacy of intellectual questioning, spiritual rebellion, and the temptation of indulgence. The idea of a hidden, powerful world where the elite could indulge without restraint, where society's rules didn't apply, continued to be an alluring concept for both the curious and the conspiratorial. People were drawn to the idea of a secret space that existed just outside the reach of the law and conventional morality. It tapped into something deep within the human psyche, the belief that, in the shadows, there are spaces where the rules can be bent or even entirely discarded. In many ways, the Hellfire Club also represents the complexities of human identity. We all wear multiple masks, public and private personas, sometimes in stark contrast to one another. For the members of the Hellfire Club, their public lives as politicians, philosophers, and high-ranking aristocrats were only one side of the story. The club allowed them to indulge their darker sides, to explore the parts of their identity that polite society wouldn't accept. This duality, the contrast between outward respectability and inward rebellion, is something that is deeply relatable. We all struggle with the tension between who we are expected to be and who we sometimes wish to be. The Hellfire Club allowed its members to reconcile that tension, albeit in a way that defied all moral boundaries. As society evolved, so did its fascination with groups like the Hellfire Club. The elite, whether in the 18th century or in modern times, have always held a unique place in our imaginations. We wonder what goes on behind the closed doors of their clubs, their meetings, their homes, and we wonder what secret desires and pleasures are hidden beneath the polished facades they present to the public. The allure of the Hellfire Club is, in part, tied to this fascination with the hidden lives of the powerful. We're drawn to the idea that they might be living in a way that is, in some ways, freer, more liberated, and more indulgent than we could ever imagine. The idea that they could be indulging in things forbidden to most people stirs both envy and fear. Modern depictions of secret societies often owe a great deal to the Hellfire Club, its activities, and its mythology. Whether through films, novels, or even modern conspiracy theories, the image of shadowy groups of powerful individuals working behind the scenes to shape the world according to their will continues to captivate. It taps into our fear of being controlled, manipulated, or excluded from the true corridors of power. The Hellfire Club, in this sense, acts as a prototype for many of these later depictions. Its combination of intellectual subversion, moral rebellion, and unbridled indulgence laid the groundwork for the modern fascination with secret societies. This is perhaps where the Hellfire Club's story diverges from that of other secret societies. Its members were not only indulging in excess for the sake of power or control. Their rebellion was against more than just the political or social order. It was a rebellion against the very idea that anyone should be bound by societal restrictions in the first place. For them, the world was a stage where anything could be played out, and they were free to act according to their own rules. This is what made their gathering so intoxicating. The idea that they could live without consequence, without fear of judgment, and without the weight of public expectations. Today, the concept of breaking the rules still holds an enormous amount of appeal. The idea that there are spaces where we can act freely, where we can throw off the constraints of society and experience something new and forbidden, continues to be something that draws us in. The Hellfire Club, for all its faults and dangers, represented an idealized version of this desire. It was a space where the rules didn't apply, a place of escape from the pressures of the world outside. And while its eventual decline served as a reminder that this kind of rebellion can only go so far, its legacy lives on as a symbol of the tension between freedom and control. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Hellfire Club's legacy is the way it mirrors a timeless human truth, that no matter how much we may try to conform, there's always a part of us that longs for something more. Whether it's intellectual rebellion, personal freedom, or the pursuit of pleasure, the Hellfire Club embodied that deep yearning. And even in its decline, its myth reminds us of the dangers of excess and the fine line between freedom and chaos. The club's secret rituals and decadent gatherings, though no longer a part of the physical world, continue to echo in the stories we tell, in the legends we pass down, and in the imaginations of those who seek to live beyond the boundaries of convention. In the end, the Hellfire Club's story isn't just about rebellion, it's about the universal struggle to understand the limits of freedom, the cost of indulgence, and the ultimate price of living outside society's norms. The club's members may have believed they were free from the constraints of society, but the world they created for themselves was ultimately just as bound by rules and limitations as the one they sought to escape. The Hellfire Club reminds us that the pursuit of ultimate freedom is not only dangerous, it can be self-destructive. Despite the Hellfire Club's eventual decline, the allure of its mythos continues to captivate not just history buffs, but anyone drawn to the idea of secret worlds, intellectual rebellion, and the unchecked indulgence of human desire. Over the centuries, the club has become a symbol of all that society deems forbidden, yet fascinating. It represents the desire for freedom without limits, the kind of freedom that exists only when the constraints of civilization, morality, and social expectation are abandoned. This tension between restraint and release, between public persona and hidden desire, is what has ensured the club's continued place in both popular culture and intellectual discussions about power, privilege, and human nature. The fascination with secret societies and the elites who belong to them has remained a constant thread throughout history. Just as the Hellfire Club was a haven for the privileged to act outside the societal norms, many modern secretive organisations, whether real or imagined, are often characterised by their sense of exclusivity and their ability to operate outside the view of the public. The idea that a select few can exist in a world of their own, a world where the laws of society don't apply, is something that has always intrigued and unsettled people. The Hellfire Club was one of the earliest examples of this, and its legacy has helped shape how we think about power, secrecy, and privilege today. In fact, the Hellfire Club's legacy isn't just confined to history. It's present in the very fabric of modern life, especially in the realms of politics, finance, and celebrity culture, where power remains often hidden behind closed doors. While today's world is vastly different from the 18th century, the idea of a hidden elite who lives by different rules persists, whether it's the idea of a powerful political figure or a tech mogul whose wealth and influence afford them freedoms that ordinary people don't have. The concept of the hidden world that the Hellfire Club embodied continues to play out in the public imagination. The club's influence can also be seen in the world of art and media. Throughout the years, writers, filmmakers, and artists have drawn inspiration from the Hellfire Club to explore themes of secrecy, rebellion, and the darker sides of human nature. In many ways, the club's story serves as a cautionary tale, warning us about the dangers of excess, unchecked power, and the consequences of living outside the rules. But it also appeals to our curiosity, feeding into our fascination with the lives of the rich and powerful. It's this dual nature of the Hellfire Club, both a warning and a lure, that ensures its lasting impact on cultural narratives. Take, for example, the portrayal of the Hellfire Club in modern popular culture. Whether it's the clandestine organisations in comic books, films, or television series, the club's influence can be seen in everything from X-Men's Hellfire Club to its role. In the world of Gothic fiction, the iconic secret club is often depicted as a place where those with power come together to indulge their wildest fantasies, whether those fantasies involve political machinations, spiritual rituals, or indulgent pleasures. These modern depictions tap into the same mythos that the Hellfire Club built centuries ago, its members' ability to live beyond the ordinary and embrace a reality that is both freeing and dangerous. This fascination with the Hellfire Club's lifestyle, its rejection of societal constraints, and its embrace of personal freedom without consequence, speaks to something fundamental within human nature. The club represents the part of us that resists conformity, that seeks out the edges of what is acceptable, and that yearns to explore the forbidden. It's the very idea of rebellion itself, the desire to push back against a system that demands conformity, all while testing the limits of freedom and indulgence. The fact that the Hellfire Club was composed of some of the most powerful men in society adds to the allure. It was a way for them to escape the public eye and experience what would have been considered scandalous in any other context. In essence, the club offered a space to be both completely free and totally unaccountable, making it an irresistible symbol for those intrigued by the idea of breaking free from society's restrictions. Yet, as we look back at the Hellfire Club and its many contradictions, we're reminded that the pursuit of ultimate freedom comes with a price. The consequences of indulgence, the risks of unchecked power, and the cost of living beyond societal norms are all part of the club's narrative. The downfall of the Hellfire Club serves as a stark reminder that while rebellion can be thrilling, it is often unsustainable. As powerful as its members were, they were not immune to the consequences of their actions, and the club's eventual dissolution illustrates that even the most elite and untouchable among us are subject to the rules of society in the end. The idea of secret societies persists today because of the emotional charge they carry, both as symbols of power and as warnings of the dangers inherent in unchecked freedom. We continue to be captivated by the thought that there might be hidden spaces in which the normal rules do not apply. These spaces, whether literal or symbolic, represent a desire to escape the mundane and explore a reality that is more daring, more unrestrained, and more intense. The Hellfire Club, in all its decadence and intellectualism, embodied that very yearning for freedom from the mundane, and in doing so it became not only a reflection of its time, but a part of a larger cultural narrative that continues to resonate with us today. As the Hellfire Club fades further into history, its cultural relevance remains as potent as ever. The allure of rebellion, secrecy, and the desire to push past the boundaries of societal norms will always remain part of the human experience. The Hellfire Club's myth has transcended its original form, becoming something greater than the sum of its debauched parts. It has become a symbol of the eternal human desire for freedom from restraint and for the pursuit of life lived on one's own terms, no matter the consequences. As we continue to reflect on the Hellfire Club's legacy, it's fascinating to realise how its themes of secrecy, power and indulgence are still relevant in our own time. The modern world, with its global networks of influence, wealth, and hidden elites, has created new arenas for the types of indulgence that the Hellfire Club members might have sought, albeit in different forms. While society has evolved considerably since the 18th century, the central tension that defined the club's appeal, the desire to escape the rules of ordinary life and explore the unspoken and the forbidden, remains a core part of human experience. The Hellfire Club's mythos endures because it taps into the most basic and primal of desires, the urge to break free from the conventions that bind us, whether they are moral, societal, or even self-imposed. Interestingly, while much of the focus on the Hellfire Club has been on its infamous activities, we should also consider the broader societal impact of its existence. The club's members were not just outcast from society, they were also part of the social elite, the intellectual class, and the political landscape of 18th century Britain. Their rebellion was not simply one of wanton hedonism. It was a radical act of self-liberation, an attempt to challenge the very forces that kept them in check. These were men who, on the surface, had everything – wealth, power, status – but who still felt the need to rebel against the norms that defined their lives. The Hellfire Club was their way of carving out an existence that was free from judgment, a space where they could truly be themselves, outside the constraints of public and private expectation. This rebellion was not without its costs, of course. The ultimate downfall of the Hellfire Club serves as a reminder of the fragility of rebellion in the face of societal pressures. The club's members, despite their intellectual prowess and influence, were still vulnerable to the larger forces of public opinion and religious authority. In many ways, their demise was inevitable. Society has a way of pushing back against those who flaunt its rules, and while the Hellfire Club may have succeeded in evading the consequences for a time, it couldn't escape them forever. The very act of defying societal norms, no matter how powerful the individual or group, is a double-edged sword. It might provide temporary liberation, but it also invites inevitable scrutiny, backlash, and eventually the collapse of the very rebellion it sought to preserve. Even though the Hellfire Club's activities were short-lived, its ideas have had a far-reaching influence. The club wasn't just about breaking laws, it was about questioning the authority that enforced them. The members sought to explore the limits of human desire and the boundaries of intellectual freedom, and in doing so they highlighted the inherent tension in any society between order and freedom. For those living under the strictures of the time, the Hellfire Club represented an alternative, an underground world where the usual rules didn't apply, and where the wealthy could enjoy a kind of unbridled autonomy. In this way, the club became a symbol of the perpetual tension between the governed and the governing, the moral and the immoral, the powerful and the powerless. As much as the Hellfire Club has been mythologized, the truth about what went on behind those secret doors remains clouded by time and rumour. We will never know for certain the extent of their activities, how much of it was exaggerated by scandal-hungry public figures, and how much was grounded in reality. What we do know is that the club was a creation of its time, a product of an era grappling with social change, intellectual upheaval, and religious questioning. The members of the Hellfire Club were in many ways representatives of the contradictions that define human nature. The intellectual and the hedonistic, the powerful and the powerless, the public and the private. Their story isn't just one of decadence. It's a tale of human longing, a search for freedom from the confines of a world that often seems too rigid, too controlled, and too predictable. The modern fascination with secret societies is also tied to this dual nature of human desire. As much as we might fear what goes on behind closed doors, we're also drawn to the idea that there might be something hidden, something forbidden, waiting for us to discover. The Hellfire Club has become a metaphor for that hidden world, a place where the most powerful men of the time sought to transcend the everyday limitations of their lives, to find something beyond what the world deemed acceptable. In the 21st century, this myth has evolved into an ever-present cultural fascination with the hidden lives of the elite. Whether in the form of conspiracy theories, or the portrayal of powerful, secretive organisations in pop culture, the Hellfire Club's allure lives on because it represents both our deepest fears and our greatest desires, a yearning to know what lies beneath the surface, and a desire to break free from the constraints that keep us from living as we truly wish. What the Hellfire Club really represents at its core is a desire for freedom without consequences, a space where the normal rules of behaviour do not apply. It is this unbridled freedom, coupled with the intellectual curiosity of its members, that continues to captivate us. It's also the reason why the club's legacy persists in both the historical record and the collective imagination. Today, as in the 18th century, people still seek out spaces where they can live without inhibition, challenge the rules of society and explore their deepest desires, whether they're doing so in the privacy of their own lives or in the glare of public attention. The Hellfire Club will always remain a powerful symbol of that desire, a reminder of the human need for both intellectual freedom and indulgence, and the tension that exists when those two forces collide. As we move forward into the 21st century, the Hellfire Club's influence still echoes through society in various forms. The club's mixture of intellectual rebellion, indulgence in excess, and defiance of societal norms is a timeless concept that continues to be relevant in our modern world. The allure of secrecy, the idea of powerful figures gathering behind closed doors to partake in forbidden pleasures, or to discuss radical philosophies, continues to stir the public imagination. Today, we see elements of the Hellfire Club's mythos re-emerge in elite secret societies, high society scandals, and even in the political and business circles that operate outside the gaze of the general public. These groups may not engage in satanic rituals or orgies as the Hellfire Club is said to have, but they still perpetuate the sense that a hidden world exists, a world where privilege, power and secrecy are intertwined. The fascination with secretive, powerful groups is deeply ingrained in our culture, and in some ways, we are still drawn to the idea of a club where the normal rules don't apply. The concept of elites, insulated from the everyday consequences that affect the rest of society, is not only a modern reality but also an enduring myth. The Hellfire Club played on that very myth, offering an enticing glimpse into a world where the powerful could defy the rules without consequence. Today, whether through speculative fiction, conspiracy theories, or discussions of modern power structures, we still look at those at the top of society and wonder what they're doing behind closed doors. What freedoms do they indulge in that are denied to the masses? What kind of power do they truly wield in the shadows? One of the more fascinating aspects of the Hellfire Club's legacy is the way it plays into the idea of elite insiders versus the public outsiders. While the members of the club were highly influential, their secret activities were hidden from the view of most of society. This sense of exclusivity, of having access to a forbidden world, has remained a potent symbol in modern culture. The idea that there are spaces where the elite can come together to make decisions, engage in secretive rituals, or pursue hidden agendas continues to fuel much of the speculation around modern-day organisations. It taps into a deep-seated belief that there are powerful forces at work in the world, ones that operate outside the norms of law and society, and that those in positions of power are in on some secret that the rest of us can only imagine. Interestingly, the myth of the Hellfire Club has also found a place in modern discussions about the darker side of power, particularly when it comes to how elites maintain their dominance and control over society. The club's rebellion against the established order and its ultimate downfall serves as a reminder that no matter how insulated the powerful may feel, they are still subject to the forces of societal change and moral outrage. In our contemporary world, where issues of wealth inequality, political corruption and corporate influence dominate the headlines, the Hellfire Club's story reminds us of the fragility of power. Its rise and fall show us how the very power that allows elites to live outside the rules can also make them vulnerable to backlash from those they seek to control or manipulate. In the realm of popular culture, the Hellfire Club continues to resonate. The very idea of secret societies of the wealthy and powerful is a concept that still intrigues us. In modern films and television shows, secret organisations often serve as metaphors for the unseen forces that shape our world. Forces that act in the shadows, hidden from the public eye. Whether these groups are portrayed as benevolent or malevolent, they tap into the same mystery that the Hellfire Club did. Their activities, whether political manipulation or acts of indulgence, are presented as part of an exclusive world where the rules don't apply, and only those who are privileged enough to be a part of it can truly understand what's going on. The Hellfire Club has also been adopted as a symbol of the transgressive. In literature, art and media, the club represents the rejection of societal conventions, a space where personal freedom reigns supreme and the pursuit of pleasure knows no bounds. In some interpretations, the Hellfire Club stands as a reminder that there is a darker side to the human need for freedom, a side that, when unchecked, can lead to excess, moral decay, and ultimately self-destruction. The club's ultimate downfall is a cautionary tale about the dangers of living without restraint, a message that is still relevant today as we confront the limits of personal autonomy in a world governed by laws, morality, and social contracts. However, as much as the Hellfire Club serves as a warning, it also serves as an ideal. For some, it remains a symbol of ultimate freedom, a place where the rules of society are tossed aside in favour of individual expression and self-discovery. It represents the desire to escape the confines of everyday life and embrace a life lived on one's own terms. Whether through art, literature, or even in our private fantasies, the Hellfire Club's message of rebellion and indulgence continues to resonate. It represents that part of us that longs to break free from the expectations and limitations that govern our lives, to live without consequence, and to explore the boundaries of our desires, whether intellectual, emotional, or physical. The lasting power of the Hellfire Club's legacy lies not just in its excesses, but in its embodiment of the eternal human struggle for autonomy. It's the same struggle that has fueled revolutions, social movements, and intellectual revolts throughout history. The club's rejection of authority, its pursuit of personal freedom, and its embrace of the darker side of life remain compelling because they speak to a very real part of human nature, the desire to break free from the conventions that limit us. In this way, the Hellfire Club, both as a real entity and as a myth, continues to offer a window into the complexities of human freedom, the allure of power, and the dangers of living beyond the limits of society's rules. The myth of the Hellfire Club has not only endured through the centuries, but has evolved into something even more potent than the sum of its original parts. The club's blend of intellectual challenge, rebellion against authority, and indulgence in excess continues to appeal to modern sensibilities, where the line between personal freedom and societal constraint is often tested. Today, its legacy exists not only as a fascinating historical footnote, but as a symbol of resistance, a reminder of the human desire to escape the weight of conventional life and explore a more liberated existence. This enduring appeal speaks to the universal longing to break free from societal norms and live according to one's own desires and instincts, an impulse that has transcended the centuries. In the modern world, we're no longer living in the rigid, structured society that the Hellfire Club's founders sought to escape, but the allure of the forbidden world the club embodied is still very much alive. We see this reflected in contemporary society's fascination with underground movements, elitist gatherings, and powerful individuals who operate behind closed doors. Whether through high society parties, elite social clubs, or secretive networks in business and politics, the theme of an exclusive world where the rules don't apply continues to resonate. The Hellfire Club's audacity to flaunt societal restrictions and its embrace of a world unburdened by rules remain relevant because, at some level, they represent an idealized version of personal freedom. Freedom that is without consequence, free from the burden of judgment, and unencumbered by the usual restrictions. Moreover, the Hellfire Club's legacy highlights an interesting tension within the human condition, the conflict between the desire for absolute personal freedom and the necessity of social responsibility. The club's members, with their vast power and wealth, sought to operate outside the constraints of morality and convention, but in doing so, they encountered the very thing they thought they could escape: consequences. The ultimate downfall of the Hellfire Club shows us that even the most privileged, the most powerful, cannot live entirely outside the boundaries of society. Their rebellion against authority ultimately led to their undoing, and this cautionary tale is one that remains relevant in the context of today's political, social, and economic landscape. The moral ambiguity of the Hellfire Club's actions adds to its complexity. For some, it remains a symbol of the dangers of excess and the eventual collapse of those who refuse to acknowledge the limitations imposed by society. But for others, it serves as a symbol of unbridled freedom, the ultimate expression of self-determination. This duality, the push and pull between the desire for total autonomy and the constraints that society imposes, continues to manifest in our current world. The Hellfire Club represents not only an exploration of the extreme ends of human indulgence, but also a deeper, more philosophical struggle, the question of whether true freedom can ever exist in a world that demands rules, structure, and conformity. At its core, the Hellfire Club's appeal is not simply about the specific activities that its members engaged in, but rather about what it represented: the possibility of creating a new kind of reality, one where the usual rules don't apply, where privilege can be wielded without restraint, and where the pursuit of pleasure and intellectual freedom are prioritized above all else. It's the very human desire to step outside the mundane, to experience life in its most extreme form, that continues to fuel the club's legend. And as long as there are people who feel confined by the expectations of society, who long for an escape from the rules that bind them, the story of the Hellfire Club will remain compelling. What is also fascinating is how the Hellfire Club taps into the idea of the hidden, the secret, and the unknown. We're all drawn to the notion of a world existing just beyond our reach, a world where we are not bound by the limitations imposed by the visible ordinary world. The club's activities, though exaggerated by time and myth, were driven by a desire to carve out a space that was secret, unmonitored, and free from the judgments of the world outside. The notion of hidden worlds, from secret societies to underground movements, remains a powerful concept. It is the mystery of what is not seen that draws us in, the intrigue of a reality existing just beyond our understanding or access. In modern storytelling, this idea of hidden, exclusive worlds is a prominent theme, whether in conspiracy theories, secretive political groups, or clandestine organizations depicted in films, books, and television shows. The Hellfire Club's myth still finds its way into these narratives, reflecting humanity's deep-seated curiosity about what goes on behind closed doors. There's something irresistible about the idea that, in our modern, regulated world, there might still exist secret pockets of power and pleasure, areas where the boundaries of morality and law no longer apply. This allure continues to captivate the imagination, reinforcing the cultural fascination with secrecy, rebellion, and the unknown. However, the Hellfire Club's ultimate fall also highlights another enduring theme, the fragility of power. No matter how entrenched one might feel in a position of privilege, there are always forces outside one's control, public opinion, political pressures, or moral outrage, that can shift the balance. The Hellfire Club's members, despite their wealth and influence, could not escape the consequences of their defiance. The club's story thus serves as a reminder that even the most powerful figures in society must eventually confront the societal systems they try to evade. This realization, which is as relevant today as it was centuries ago, underscores the precarious nature of rebellion, especially when it challenges deeply ingrained societal structures. In the end, the Hellfire Club remains a compelling story because it encapsulates so many of the fundamental tensions within the human experience: freedom versus responsibility, privilege versus consequence, rebellion versus authority. Its myth offers a glimpse into a world where power is unchecked, where ideas can be explored without limit, and where desires can be fulfilled without fear of reprisal. But it also shows us the price of such freedom, the limits of personal autonomy in a world that requires order. The Hellfire Club's story is, ultimately, a meditation on the balance between liberty and structure, a balance that continues to shape our world today. As we continue to reflect on the Hellfire Club's place in history, it becomes clear that its legacy is not just one of excess and scandal, but of broader cultural implications. The club's story highlights the enduring tension between individual freedom and the constraints imposed by society, something that has remained relevant throughout the centuries. This conflict is central to the human experience, the desire to break free from societal expectations and live authentically, yet the realization that total freedom often comes with significant costs. The Hellfire Club, in all its audacity, embodied this conflict, offering its members a space where they could freely indulge their desires without fear of public judgment. But in doing so, it also became a cautionary tale of the perils of living outside the norms that keep society functioning. What makes the Hellfire Club so enduring in both historical and cultural conversations is the way it represents a paradox that is still relevant today. On the one hand, it embodies the desire for rebellion, for casting off the weight of tradition and social constraint, and for exploring what life could be like when all the rules are thrown aside. On the other hand, the club's eventual downfall highlights the dangers of excess, of pushing too far beyond the limits of social norms, and of living without accountability. The Hellfire Club was a space where the powerful could indulge in unrestrained pleasure, but it was also a space where they could face the consequences of their own transgressions. The club's history teaches us that even the most privileged cannot entirely escape the consequences of their actions, no matter how much power they wield. Despite the club's fall from grace, the mythology surrounding it has continued to evolve and thrive. One reason for this is the ongoing fascination with the intersection of wealth, power, and secrecy. The Hellfire Club, in its prime, represented the epitome of secretive elite gatherings, groups of powerful men who had the freedom to explore and indulge in things that most of society could only dream of. This exclusivity, the sense that there are worlds and experiences hidden from the public eye, continues to resonate today. Whether in the form of corporate boardrooms, political backdoors, or high society affairs, the appeal of hidden worlds where the rules don't apply is just as compelling now as it was in the 18th century. These secretive spaces remain a focal point of intrigue, drawing people to wonder what happens behind closed doors and whether such spaces hold the key to power, pleasure, or forbidden knowledge. Today, the idea of secret societies, of groups that exist outside the constraints of the ordinary world, still sparks the imagination. It's no wonder that the Hellfire Club, with its intellectual rebellion and defiance of social norms, continues to play a role in stories about the wealthy and powerful. Its myth lives on in countless depictions of shadowy organizations and underground movements. These portrayals tap into the same fears and desires that the Hellfire Club represented: the fear that the powerful are secretly manipulating the world, and the desire to be a part of something exclusive, something that lies just beyond the reach of everyday life. In a world where the powerful often seem untouchable, the Hellfire Club's story continues to feed the desire for a glimpse into that hidden, forbidden world. The notion of secret power is especially pertinent in today's society, where issues of wealth inequality, political corruption, and corporate influence often seem to operate in the shadows, beyond the scrutiny of the public eye. Just as the Hellfire Club was a symbol of a world where the elite acted outside the boundaries of society's rules, modern society often gives rise to similar fears, that the rich and powerful operate in a hidden realm, making decisions that affect the rest of the world while remaining insulated from the consequences of their actions. The Hellfire Club serves as a metaphor for this hidden world, one where the ordinary person is excluded from the decisions that shape their lives. It represents a world where the rules don't apply to those who hold the keys to power, and where the privileges of wealth and influence create a space for indulgence and manipulation. In a sense, the Hellfire Club has become a symbol not just of rebellious elites, but of the ultimate human struggle for autonomy. Its members were among the most privileged in British society, yet they sought something more, a space to break free from the very social systems that had elevated them. This search for personal freedom is something that everyone, regardless of their position in society, can relate to. The Hellfire Club wasn't just about breaking laws or ignoring moral codes, it was about the pursuit of something deeper, the ability to define oneself on one's own terms, without the interference of societal expectations or the judgment of others. This longing for personal autonomy, for the ability to live without restriction, continues to resonate today in a world where individuals are constantly negotiating the tension between their personal desires and the demands of society. But as we know from the Hellfire Club's tragic end, the pursuit of total autonomy is fraught with peril. The club's eventual decline underscores a fundamental truth, that unchecked freedom, when taken too far, can lead to self-destruction. The excesses that characterised the Hellfire Club's gatherings, its rejection of social and religious norms, its embrace of hedonism without consequence, were ultimately its undoing. The very rebellion that defined it eventually led to its collapse. This paradox, the danger inherent in living too freely, is one that continues to surface in modern society. While the pursuit of personal freedom is a central theme in contemporary culture, we're also reminded that too much freedom can lead to moral and societal decay. The Hellfire Club's myth serves as both a symbol of what we desire and a warning about the consequences of indulging that desire without restraint. Ultimately, the Hellfire Club remains a compelling story because it touches on the universal human experience of seeking freedom while navigating the boundaries imposed by society. It's a tale of excess and rebellion, but also one of the inevitable consequences that follow when the natural order is disrupted. The club's members sought to live outside the confines of conventional life, but in doing so, they created a world that ultimately couldn't sustain itself. The Hellfire Club, for all its intrigue and decadence, serves as a reminder that no matter how powerful we become, or how much we seek to break free from society's constraints, there are limits to what even the most privileged can escape. It's a story that remains relevant, as it forces us to confront our own desires for freedom, the limits of that freedom, and the price we are willing to pay for it. The myth of the Hellfire Club is ultimately about more than just secret gatherings or debauchery. It's a metaphor for the complex human desire to push boundaries while still seeking meaning. The idea of a powerful intellectual elite coming together to reject societal norms, questioning not just authority but also the very idea of societal constraints, reflects a universal truth that transcends time. At its heart, the Hellfire Club represents the eternal tension between liberation and self-destruction, between the quest for ultimate freedom and the reality of the consequences that follow. In today's world, where individualism is often seen as the ultimate expression of personal freedom, the club's legacy serves as a reminder that unchecked autonomy can lead to moral bankruptcy, and even the most elite can be brought low by their own excesses. The enduring fascination with the Hellfire Club can be seen in its continued presence in the collective imagination. Today, we still see echoes of its mythos in everything from media portrayals of secret societies to real-world elite gatherings that take place behind closed doors. Whether it's the world of corporate power players, political insiders, or cultural elites, the idea that there are hidden spaces where power and influence are wielded without accountability remains deeply embedded in the public consciousness. The Hellfire Club, with its mix of intellectual freedom, moral rebellion, and indulgence in excess, becomes an iconic symbol of how power can isolate individuals from the reality faced by ordinary people. And just like the club's members, these contemporary figures often seek escape from the social systems that both elevate and constrain them. In many ways, the Hellfire Club story illustrates the central paradox of human existence, the push-pull between the desire for freedom and the need for order. The club's members were individuals who had already achieved the highest levels of privilege, yet still sought something more, a space where they could live without consequence, free from the watchful eyes of society. Their pursuit of freedom was not just about rejecting laws or social rules, but about rejecting the very concept of limitation itself. The myth of the Hellfire Club speaks to that deeper yearning, the human desire to be liberated not just from external restrictions, but from the idea that we are constrained by any form of morality, religion, or societal structure. This idea is particularly compelling in today's world, where the concept of personal liberty is often presented as an ideal to strive for. We see it in debates over privacy, freedom of speech, and individual rights. Yet, these same freedoms often come with their own set of challenges and consequences. The Hellfire Club serves as a cautionary tale. When personal freedom is pursued without any thought to the larger social fabric, it can lead to a breakdown of the very structures that protect individuals from the chaos of unchecked desire. This is the warning the Hellfire Club offers us in modern times, the realization that absolute freedom is not without its dangers. The balance between personal autonomy and the collective good is one that requires constant negotiation, and the story of the Hellfire Club forces us to confront the consequences when that balance is lost. One of the most intriguing elements of the Hellfire Club's legacy is the way it reflects the allure of defiance, of rejecting the social norms and moral codes that society tries to impose. The members of the Hellfire Club were not merely defying authority, they were also questioning the very fabric of the society that afforded them their wealth and power. This sense of rebellion was, in some ways, a way to reaffirm their personal autonomy. By breaking the rules of society, they were not just challenging external structures, they were defining themselves in opposition to the world around them. This intense desire to create a personal identity outside the confines of social expectations speaks to something that resonates deeply in modern culture. It's the allure of living outside the box, rejecting the standard path that everyone else follows, and creating a life that feels authentically one's own. Yet, as the Hellfire Club story also demonstrates, living outside the boundaries of societal norms can also isolate you. The pursuit of absolute freedom, while enticing, can also alienate you from the very people and systems that provide the structure necessary for society to function. As the Hellfire Club members eventually learned, the privilege and power that allowed them to live without fear of consequence could not protect them from the social backlash that followed. The club's eventual collapse is a reminder that society's moral and social forces will always find a way to push back. The reality that even the most privileged can be undone by their own excesses is one of the key reasons the Hellfire Club's story continues to resonate. In our own time, we still struggle with this balancing act. On one hand, we crave the kind of freedom that the Hellfire Club members enjoyed, the ability to act without consequence, to indulge in our desires without judgment, and to escape the pressures of a world that seems to demand conformity. On the other hand, we recognize that society cannot function if everyone were to live by those same rules. The Hellfire Club's story forces us to confront this contradiction head-on. It's not just a story of excess and scandal. It's a profound meditation on the limits of individual freedom and the need for collective responsibility. In exploring the myth of the Hellfire Club, we find ourselves reflecting on our own desires, our own limitations, and the boundaries that society places on us. The club's legacy endures not only because it offers a glimpse into a world of unrestrained indulgence, but because it forces us to confront the question of what happens when we seek freedom without limits. The Hellfire Club, in all its decadence, serves as a warning that the pursuit of ultimate liberty, without regard for the social order, can lead not to liberation but to ruin. In our own lives, we are reminded that the greatest freedoms often come with the highest costs that are often paid when we break the rules that bind society together. The Hellfire Club's ultimate decline, as much as it reflects the consequences of indulgence and rebellion, also offers a lesson in the transient nature of power, even for the most privileged. The members of the Hellfire Club, despite their wealth and influence, were unable to protect themselves from the societal forces that eventually overtook them. This realization, that even the elite, no matter how insulated they may seem, are ultimately subject to the judgments and repercussions of the larger world, adds another layer of complexity to the Hellfire Club's story. In a time when the gap between the rich and the poor was vast, the idea that the elite could be brought down by the very social norms they rejected underscores the fragility of privilege. The Hellfire Club's downfall serves as a reminder that no matter how high one may rise in society, no one is immune from the moral compass of the collective. In today's world, the lessons of the Hellfire Club resonate even more strongly, particularly as we grapple with the idea of power and privilege. In a global society where wealth and influence are often concentrated in the hands of a select few, the Hellfire Club stands as both a warning and a reminder. The desire to live beyond the rules, to create a reality where one's personal desires and pleasures are prioritized, is not a new phenomenon. It's been with us throughout history, and the allure of breaking free from the societal expectations that govern our lives continues to be a powerful force. But as the Hellfire Club story illustrates, there is a fine line between liberation and self-destruction. The very freedoms that allow the elite to indulge in their desires without consequence are also the freedoms that make them vulnerable to backlash, to public scandal, and ultimately to their own undoing. The concept of privilege, especially when it's coupled with secrecy and indulgence, remains a key point of intrigue in modern society. As much as we might criticise the excesses of the rich and powerful, there's also a part of us that is captivated by their ability to live without the constraints that most people face. The Hellfire Club's members epitomise this allure. Wealthy, powerful, and completely unconcerned with the moral and social boundaries that constrain the rest of society. In some ways, their defiance of societal expectations only serve to magnify their power, and yet, as their story shows, there's a dangerous consequence to this freedom. Power, when abused, has a way of turning on its wielder. The Hellfire Club's eventual collapse was not just the result of moral outrage, but of the self-destructive nature of living without any boundaries. Their rebellion, while initially liberating, ultimately revealed that absolute freedom is an illusion. In modern popular culture, the Hellfire Club has become a shorthand for the darker aspects of power and influence. In films, books, and TV shows, we often see elite groups depicted as indulging in forbidden pleasures, manipulating society from behind the scenes, and living according to their own rules. These portrayals tap into the same fear and fascination that the Hellfire Club evoked during its time, that the wealthy and powerful live lives that we cannot access, that they have secret knowledge, that they are free to do what they want without any consequence. Whether it's in a political drama or a thriller about corporate corruption, the idea of a hidden world where the powerful gather to make decisions, engage in secret rituals, or indulge in their desires has remained a powerful narrative. The Hellfire Club, with its blend of intellectual subversion and indulgence in excess, laid the foundation for these modern depictions. However, the Hellfire Club's enduring appeal also lies in its more intellectual aspects. For many of its members, the group was not simply a place to escape societal constraints. It was also a space to explore radical ideas, to discuss philosophy, politics, and religion, and to challenge the very structures that governed their world. The club wasn't just a place for indulgence, it was a sanctuary for free thought, for those who wanted to push the boundaries of intellectual exploration in a society that often stifled radical ideas. This blend of intellectualism and indulgence made the club a unique historical phenomenon. It combined the pursuit of knowledge with the rejection of authority, creating a space where the limits of both social and intellectual life could be tested. This aspect of the Hellfire Club is particularly relevant today, as we continue to see intellectual rebellion and radical ideas challenging the status quo, from political movements to the rise of new forms of art and expression. The club serves as a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge and the rejection of conventional norms can often go hand in hand. In exploring the club's intellectual legacy, it's clear that the Hellfire Club was as much a product of its time as it was a reaction to it. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason, personal freedom, and the questioning of authority, created an environment in which groups like the Hellfire Club could thrive. It was a time of immense social change, and the club was one of the ways in which the intellectual elite expressed their discontent with the traditional structures of power. In this sense, the Hellfire Club was not simply a decadent and scandalous group. It was also a response to a world in which traditional authority, whether religious, political or social, was being questioned and reshaped. Today, the club's story continues to be relevant because it reflects the ongoing tension between progress and tradition. It speaks to the desire to break free from the past while still acknowledging that the past shapes the present. The Hellfire Club's existence was in many ways a product of its time, a time of political upheaval, intellectual questioning and social revolution. But it was also a space that sought to create a new kind of freedom, one that rejected the constraints of the old order. This desire for freedom without consequence, this search for an escape from the limitations imposed by society, is something that remains ever present in both the cultural narratives we create and the lives we lead today. The Hellfire Club's mythos also holds a mirror to modern-day concerns about the corruption of power and the tendency for the elite to operate outside the rules. In the 18th century, it was the aristocracy, the ruling class of the time, that created such exclusive and secretive spaces where rules didn't apply to them. Today, however, the idea of such societies has expanded beyond the traditional bounds of political and social elites. In our globalized world, the modern versions of the Hellfire Club are more subtle, often existing in boardrooms, high-end social circles, or closed-off political gatherings. These modern clubs reflect the same dynamics that allowed the Hellfire Club to thrive, the desire for a space where the wealthy and powerful can operate freely, unbound by the same societal expectations that constrain the average person. Whether it's tech moguls, politicians, or global business leaders, these figures still gather behind closed doors, far from the public eye, where they can exert influence and discuss matters that may shape the world without facing the consequences of public scrutiny. The Hellfire Club has evolved into a symbol of everything that is hidden, dangerous, and alluring about the corridors of power. It serves as a backdrop for our fears and fascinations with secrecy, the idea that the most influential people in the world might not only be manipulating the global stage, but also indulging in vices that the average person could only dream of. The club's ability to embody both intellectual subversion and indulgence in physical pleasures captures a unique space in history, where ideas of personal freedom collided with the pursuit of unrestricted desire. The tension between intellectual curiosity and indulgence in decadence was a defining feature of the Hellfire Club, and it's this contradiction that continues to fuel its legacy in our cultural imagination. We're drawn to this narrative because it encapsulates a part of the human experience, the desire for complete freedom, the rebellion against norms, and the undeniable truth that even in a world of privilege, the consequences of one's actions will eventually surface. As much as the Hellfire Club is remembered for its hedonistic gatherings, it's important to also acknowledge how the club's intellectual atmosphere set it apart from many other secret societies of the time. While many groups operated with a sole focus on clandestine rituals or political maneuvers, the Hellfire Club attracted individuals who were not only eager to break with societal norms but were also deeply engaged in philosophical and intellectual exploration. These men were not merely indulging in vice, they were discussing radical ideas that often challenged the very foundations of their world. They rejected the rigid structure of religious and political authority and sought a new kind of freedom, one where the pursuit of knowledge and the liberation of the mind went hand in hand with their desire to indulge their more sensual desires. This intellectual component is crucial to understanding the Hellfire Club's enduring appeal, as it blends the pursuit of personal liberty with the question of how to challenge societal constraints without destroying the very fabric of society itself. In many ways, the Hellfire Club's intellectual pursuits can be seen as a precursor to the more radical Enlightenment thinkers of the time. Figures like Voltaire and Rousseau sought to push the boundaries of reason and thought, rejecting the authority of the church and the aristocracy in favour of reason, liberty, and equality. While the Hellfire Club's approach was more hedonistic and less systematic than the philosophical movements of the Enlightenment, the members shared a similar dissatisfaction with the societal order. Both the Hellfire Club and Enlightenment thinkers sought to dismantle the structures of control that kept people in check, even if they approached this goal through vastly different means. The Hellfire Club, in its radical experimentation with freedom, was pushing the boundaries of intellectual thought by demonstrating that societal norms weren't just oppressive in their politics, but in their personal lives as well. However, the club's fate serves as a potent reminder of the limits of rebellion. particularly for those in positions of power. The very privilege that allowed the Hellfire Club's members to operate outside the law and morality also made them susceptible to scrutiny and backlash. In an age where reputation and honour were everything, the scandal surrounding their indulgences was a threat to their political and social positions. For all their intellectual achievements and political clout, the members were not immune to the forces of public opinion, and this ultimately contributed to the club's disbandment. While their intellectual contributions may have been significant, the consequences of their hedonistic lifestyle caught up with them, forcing the club into decline. This paradox, the clash between their intellectual pursuits and their indulgent behaviour, reminds us that rebellion can only go so far before it risks dismantling the very foundations it seeks to free itself from. Even today, the story of the Hellfire Club teaches us about the relationship between power, privilege, and accountability. As society has become more transparent, with increased access to information and the power of social media, the existence of secretive organisations and closed-off networks seems increasingly anachronistic. Yet, despite the advances of technology and communication, the allure of hidden spaces where the powerful can gather without the watchful eye of the public remains. Whether in the form of elite political summits, corporate boardrooms, or clandestine clubs, the appeal of a world beyond scrutiny persists. In many ways, the Hellfire Club story continues to resonate because it is a reflection of these dynamics. The desire for freedom from social norms, the pursuit of power without accountability, and the tension between intellectual and personal autonomy. As the Hellfire Club fades into the annals of history, it remains an essential part of our cultural understanding of power, secrecy, and freedom. Its enduring myth highlights the complexity of human desire, the struggle to balance the pursuit of personal liberation with the responsibilities that come with power. The club's combination of intellectualism, hedonism, and social rebellion speaks to an underlying truth that is timeless. The pursuit of ultimate freedom, without any acknowledgement of its consequences, is a path fraught with peril. Yet, for all its dangers, the Hellfire Club's legacy endures as a reminder that the human desire to escape societal constraints, to live freely and authentically, will always be a powerful force. The Hellfire Club's enduring place in both history and popular culture reflects its deep connection to the human condition, our constant push-pull between the desire for personal freedom and the necessity of living within societal boundaries. Its members, though they had everything, still sought to explore and defy the rules that governed not just their public lives, but their private desires. The club's members weren't just rebelling against external authority. They were attempting to navigate the internal tensions that exist within us all. The conflict between personal fulfillment and the consequences of living without restraint. It's this universal struggle that continues to make the Hellfire Club relevant, as it forces us to confront the limits of our own freedom and to question how far we are willing to go to satisfy our desires, even at the risk of losing everything. In many ways, the Hellfire Club serves as a metaphor for the tension between autonomy and accountability, a theme that is just as prominent in contemporary society as it was in the 18th century. Today, as power structures become more opaque, and as the lines between private and public lives continue to blur, the story of the Hellfire Club resonates with anyone who has ever questioned the cost of personal liberty. It speaks to the heart of modern anxieties about the elite, the powerful, and the potential consequences of their actions. As we become more aware of the influence that a few individuals can wield over politics, business, and culture, we find ourselves drawn to the idea of a hidden world where those at the top can manipulate the rules to suit their needs. The Hellfire Club embodies this very idea, a world in which the elite could indulge their pleasures, break the rules, and challenge societal norms without fear of consequence. This desire for power without accountability is still deeply embedded in modern politics and society. The more we uncover about the hidden lives of the rich and powerful, the more we are confronted with the idea that the rules apply differently to those at the top. The Hellfire Club, in this regard, is a reminder that even those who appear to be beyond reproach are still vulnerable to the scrutiny of the public, and that the pursuit of absolute freedom, whether personal or political, can ultimately be self-destructive. The history of the club shows us that no matter how powerful one becomes, the illusion of absolute freedom can unravel, revealing the complexities and consequences of acting outside of societal norms. For all the pleasures it promised, the Hellfire Club's end underscores a simple truth. Indulgence without accountability is unsustainable. Furthermore, the intellectual aspects of the Hellfire Club remain a key part of its legacy. While its members are often remembered for their debauchery, the club was also a space where radical ideas about religion, politics and philosophy could be explored, ideas that would go on to shape the Enlightenment and the intellectual revolutions that followed. The club represented an intersection of intellectual rebellion and indulgence, a combination that made it both dangerous and intriguing. In a world that was beginning to question authority, the Hellfire Club's defiance was not simply about rejecting societal norms, but about challenging the very structures of power that governed everyday life. The club's members understood that true freedom, both intellectually and personally, could not be achieved without dismantling the systems of control that had long dictated the course of human existence. This desire to challenge those systems, whether religious, political or social, remains a key part of the Hellfire Club's appeal today. In the modern world, we still see this same desire for intellectual freedom combined with the pursuit of personal indulgence. While the methods may have changed, the quest for spaces where the rules don't apply is still present. Secretive gatherings, underground movements, and exclusive clubs continue to exist in the modern world, where the powerful can retreat to spaces that are immune to the scrutiny of the public. Whether in the form of hidden political meetings, exclusive corporate gatherings, or clandestine societal events, the idea of the Hellfire Club still persists, reminding us that the yearning for spaces where personal freedom and intellectual exploration can flourish outside the boundaries of convention is a timeless impulse. Moreover, the Hellfire Club's influence continues to be felt in the arts, where its themes of rebellion, intellectual freedom, and indulgence remain pervasive. From literature to film, the image of secret societies and elite clubs continues to capture the imagination. The Hellfire Club has been woven into countless stories, often depicted as a symbol of unchecked power and the dangers of living beyond the rules. These modern retellings of the Hellfire Club tap into the same fascination with secrecy and excess that was prevalent in the 18th century. But beyond the hedonistic image, these portrayals also reflect the intellectual and philosophical rebellion that characterized the club in its heyday. They echo the belief that true liberation, whether intellectual, social or personal, can only come when individuals dare to break free from the systems of power that constrain them. Despite the passage of time, the Hellfire Club's story continues to offer a lens through which we can examine the complexities of power, freedom, and rebellion. Its legacy challenges us to question the boundaries between personal autonomy and collective responsibility. It serves as both a symbol of the human desire to break free from societal constraints and a warning about the consequences of doing so without regard for the larger consequences. The club's members, for all their privilege, were not immune from the backlash of society, and their downfall reminds us that even the most powerful individuals are subject to the forces of judgment and consequence. The Hellfire Club, in its debauchery and intellectual rebellion, ultimately reveals the fragility of freedom, especially when it is pursued without any consideration for the greater good. The Hellfire Club's myth continues to evolve, and in modern times, its legacy speaks to something deeper about human nature, the tension between autonomy and the structures of power that shape our lives. The idea of a secret society of the rich and powerful, living beyond the norms that govern everyone else, offers a seductive narrative. Yet it also raises important questions about the nature of privilege, control, and the fine line between rebellion and destruction. In the 18th century, the club's actions were a radical rejection of the world they inhabited, a world governed by strict moral codes, religious authority, and societal expectations. But today, that same yearning for freedom and autonomy, when taken to its extreme, becomes less a revolutionary act and more a reflection of the growing divide between those with power and those without. The Hellfire Club's radical disregard for the rules can still be seen today in movements that challenge power structures, whether in the political arena, the corporate world, or the realm of social and cultural influence. Yet, as history shows, breaking the rules comes with its own set of consequences. The modern world, with its increasing concentration of wealth and power, often seems to replicate the dynamics that gave rise to the Hellfire Club. While the methods may be subtler, the underlying motivations remain the same: the powerful have access to freedoms that most people can only dream of. Whether through closed-door political meetings, elite corporate gatherings, or private social clubs, the rich and influential continue to gather in spaces where the usual rules don't apply. These secretive environments continue to fuel speculation and conspiracy theories, just as the Hellfire Club once did. In a society where transparency is often seen as the ideal, the idea of a hidden world where the powerful can act with impunity remains deeply alluring, even if we understand the risks and consequences that come with it. In this sense, the Hellfire Club remains as much a symbol of what is hidden from view as it does a cautionary tale of how unchecked indulgence can lead to the downfall of even the most privileged. The club's members were not just seeking intellectual freedom, they were testing the very limits of societal control. In a world where the privileged can manipulate systems for their own benefit, the Hellfire Club's narrative taps into our fears of power being wielded outside the public eye, free from accountability. In this regard, the Hellfire Club transcends its historical context and becomes a metaphor for how power operates today, sometimes in shadowy, unspoken ways, far from the watchful eyes of society. At the same time, the Hellfire Club remains a reminder that the pursuit of ultimate freedom, whether intellectual, sexual, or philosophical, cannot exist in a vacuum. While the club's members may have escaped the traditional constraints of society, their actions ultimately undermined the very privileges they sought to enjoy. The consequences of their unchecked indulgence were not only social but personal, leading to their eventual fall from grace. This paradox, the simultaneous allure and danger of total freedom, is one that resonates with modern individuals, particularly as we see the limits of personal autonomy in today's interconnected world. The Hellfire Club's fall is a stark reminder that the pursuit of unfettered liberty without consideration for the larger social fabric can lead to isolation, loss of power, and societal collapse. In a world that often celebrates individualism, the story of the Hellfire Club encourages us to consider the broader implications of our actions. It forces us to confront the balance between personal desires and social responsibility. The members of the club believed that by breaking free of societal norms, they could experience the ultimate freedom. But their rebellion came at a cost. Their story, as much as it captures the imagination, also holds a mirror up to modern society, reminding us that no one, no matter how powerful, can completely escape the consequences of their actions. While the Hellfire Club's myth continues to intrigue, it also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of living beyond the constraints of society's structures. It's a warning that, even in our search for ultimate freedom, we must always be mindful of the impact our actions have on the world around us. The Hellfire Club's story is more than just an account of lavish indulgence. It's about the human struggle for autonomy in a world that seeks to impose limits on our behaviour. In a time when individuals are increasingly challenging authority, whether through political activism, cultural movements, or personal freedom, the Hellfire Club's story serves as a reminder of the complexity of rebellion. It was not just a rebellion against external authority, but also a challenge to the very idea of societal structures and expectations. The club's members, by rejecting these structures, sought to create a new form of life, one where they could explore new intellectual and physical freedoms without constraint. However, the eventual consequences of their actions force us to confront the reality that such freedom is often fleeting, and that the quest for autonomy without responsibility can lead to unforeseen consequences. The Hellfire Club's continued relevance in our cultural consciousness highlights a deep-seated curiosity about what happens when we step outside the established norms. In exploring this myth, we engage in a dialogue about the limits of personal freedom, the balance between autonomy and social responsibility, and the consequences of pushing too far beyond the boundaries of society. As much as we long for the kind of freedom the club represented, we are also reminded that those who seek to live without boundaries often find themselves trapped by the very forces they sought to escape. The Hellfire Club's myth lives on as a symbol of both our aspirations and our warnings, a complex narrative that speaks to the heart of the human desire for both liberation and responsibility. The Hellfire Club's legacy is undeniably entwined with our fascination with the idea of secret spaces where the rules of society are suspended, where privilege, power, and secrecy dominate. Its myth has evolved over time, transcending its 18th century roots to become an emblem of elite rebellion, one that continues to captivate and provoke curiosity. The club's exclusivity, its ability to operate beyond the reach of public norms, mirrors the ways in which modern elites often navigate their power in the shadows. Just as the Hellfire Club once served as a space for the most influential figures to indulge in their deepest desires, today's elite circles often do the same, albeit in more subtle ways. Whether through corporate backrooms, political conspiracies, or even the social media platforms that control global discourse, the idea of a hidden world where the powerful operate freely from scrutiny remains potent. And while these modern spaces may not involve mock satanic rituals or illicit sexual excess, the underlying principle remains. Those at the top often find themselves insulated from the consequences of their actions, just as the Hellfire Club's members once were. But the modern appeal of the Hellfire Club also lies in the way its story serves as a cautionary tale for today's society. The club's members believed they could live without consequence, and in doing so they blurred the lines between intellectual rebellion and unchecked indulgence. In today's world, where issues of privilege, corruption, and social inequality dominate the conversation, the Hellfire Club remains a potent symbol of the dangers of living beyond the rules. Its downfall serves as a reminder that even the most insulated elite can be vulnerable when society's forces, whether moral, political, or social, finally catch up with them. The club's eventual collapse suggests that no one is truly above the law, that the consequences of living outside the social order will always find a way to make themselves felt. This lesson is just as relevant today as we watch powerful individuals and institutions become embroiled in scandals that expose their hidden worlds of excess and privilege. The myth of the Hellfire Club also draws attention to the ways in which our current society still grapples with the tension between freedom and responsibility. In an era where the pursuit of individual rights and personal autonomy is championed, the Hellfire Club's story forces us to ask how far freedom can be pushed before it becomes destructive. The club's rebellion was not simply about rejecting authority, it was about rejecting the very idea that anyone should be bound by moral or societal constraints. This radical idea of freedom without responsibility, of living without limits, was an act of intellectual and social subversion, yet it also led to the club's undoing. Today we face a similar dilemma. In our quest for individual freedom, how do we balance the pursuit of personal desires with the responsibilities we owe to others and to society? The Hellfire Club challenges us to consider this balance, to question the extent to which our actions should be regulated, and whether absolute freedom can ever truly coexist with a functional society. In exploring the Hellfire Club's myth, we also confront the realities of power and its corrupting influence. The club's members, by operating in secret and indulging in excess, were making a statement about the inequities of their society, the way power allowed them to act outside the boundaries that governed everyone else. Today, we continue to see similar dynamics at play, where powerful individuals and groups act with impunity, shielded from the consequences that might face the average person. In this way, the Hellfire Club's story is not just one of moral decay, it's a story about the abuse of power, about how those who are in positions of influence often find themselves exempt from the very rules they impose on others. The club's members revelled in their privilege, and their unchecked indulgence reflected the growing sense of disconnection that power can create. It is a reminder that, as much as power may offer freedom, it can also breed a sense of detachment from the reality that everyone else lives in. A detachment that can be as dangerous as it is seductive. Perhaps one of the most enduring aspects of the Hellfire Club's legacy is the way it has been incorporated into modern popular culture. The club's name has become synonymous with decadence, secrecy, and the darker sides of human nature. Whether in books, movies, or television, the Hellfire Club is often depicted as a space where the rich and powerful gather to manipulate the world, indulge in forbidden pleasures, or experiment with ideas that challenge the very foundations of society. These portrayals often blur the line between fact and fiction, but in doing so they speak to the powerful symbolism that the Hellfire Club continues to embody. A hidden world where power and indulgence reign and where the rules don't apply. The modern-day Hellfire Club, whether in fiction or in whispers of real-life elite gatherings, continues to capture our imaginations, serving as a reminder of our ongoing fascination with secretive, unregulated spaces that exist beyond the reach of ordinary life. The club's presence in popular culture also highlights a deeper truth about human nature. Our desire for freedom is, in many ways, balanced by our curiosity about those who can live without limits. The Hellfire Club represents not just a rebellion against authority, but a yearning for the ultimate form of autonomy, one that is free from the constraints imposed by law, religion, or society. In today's world, where many feel constrained by societal norms, the club's myth provides an escape, an idealized vision of a life unburdened by rules. It speaks to our fascination with excess, with the idea of escaping the mundane, and with the idea that, at least for the powerful, a world without consequences might be possible. But just as the Hellfire Club ultimately faced its reckoning, the myth serves as a reminder that even the most elite can't escape the forces of society indefinitely. The Hellfire Club's myth, with its themes of intellectual subversion, indulgence and rebellion, continues to resonate in the modern world, where the tension between personal freedom and societal control is as relevant as ever. The club's very existence was a challenge to the norms of its time, pushing the boundaries of acceptable behaviour and defying the structures that sought to regulate every aspect of life. In many ways, it embodied the paradox of the human condition, the desire for autonomy and exploration, yet the inevitable consequences of rejecting the rules that govern us. In today's world, this struggle still plays out on a grand scale. The quest for freedom, the yearning to break free from the constraints of society, continues to be at the forefront of political and social movements. The Hellfire Club's legacy serves as both an inspiration and a warning, an example of how the pursuit of ultimate freedom can be both a liberating and destructive force. The story of the Hellfire Club is not just one of a bygone era, but also one that continues to offer insights into the human desire for power, freedom, and the complexities of moral rebellion. The members of the Hellfire Club were able to live in a world where they felt exempt from the rules that governed the lives of the majority. They were able to gather in secret, engage in intellectual exploration, and indulge their desires without the scrutiny of public opinion. This idea of a hidden, privileged world, one where the elite can live beyond the law, continues to capture our imagination. Whether in the form of corporate elites, politicians, or even cultural icons, there are still spaces where the powerful operate without accountability, sheltered from the consequences that ordinary people might face. This dynamic of privilege, secrecy, and influence remains central to how we view power in the modern world. At the same time, the Hellfire Club serves as a stark reminder that, no matter how insulated one may seem, power and privilege are not immune from the forces that seek to regulate and correct. The club's ultimate downfall shows us that even the most insulated individuals can be brought down by the very society they sought to defy. The excesses that defined the Hellfire Club were ultimately its undoing, as the moral outrage and public disapproval that had once simmered in the background grew into a force that could no longer be ignored. The club's fall highlights a fundamental truth about the nature of power. Those who live outside the law are often the first to be targeted when that law is challenged, or when society finally has enough of their indulgence. The Hellfire Club's decline is a cautionary tale, one that warns us of the limits of personal freedom and the dangers of ignoring the broader social fabric. The modern-day allure of the Hellfire Club lies not only in its scandalous activities, but in its representation of rebellion, against the system, against authority, and against the very norms that bind us all. Whether it's in our fascination with secret societies, elite circles, or the darker sides of politics and business, the Hellfire Club serves as a touchstone for our ongoing curiosity about power, secrecy, and freedom. We are drawn to the idea of a hidden world where rules do not apply, where the powerful can indulge their every whim, free from the consequences that would otherwise follow. But the story of the Hellfire Club reminds us that this kind of freedom, unrestrained, absolute, is not sustainable, and it often leads to the erosion of the very systems that support society's stability. In exploring the myth of the Hellfire Club, we also confront a deeper question about the nature of rebellion. The club's members, while seeking freedom from societal constraints, were also engaging in a larger philosophical rebellion. They were rejecting not just the rules of conduct, but the very concept of moral and intellectual authority. In their gatherings, they sought to break free from the structures that had long governed not just their personal lives, but the world at large. This rejection of authority, coupled with the pursuit of hedonistic pleasures, speaks to a larger human impulse, the desire to assert one's autonomy, to live outside the prescribed boundaries, and to explore life without restraint. But this same desire for ultimate freedom inevitably brings conflict. The Hellfire Club's rebellion against authority was a profound challenge, but it was one that ultimately turned inward, as the members themselves faced the consequences of living outside the norms. The intellectual legacy of the Hellfire Club is another aspect that has kept its story alive. Despite the club's more decadent pursuits, its members were also intellectuals, philosophers and thinkers who were deeply engaged in the questions of their time. They were not simply acting out of a desire for rebellion, but were also seeking new ways to understand power, morality and society. The club's rejection of religious and political authority was not just a statement of excess. It was a philosophical challenge to the very foundations of the world they lived in. This intellectual component of the Hellfire Club aligns it with the broader intellectual movements of the time, particularly the Enlightenment, which sought to break free from the constraints of religious dogma and question the role of government and authority. The Hellfire Club, in its own way, contributed to this conversation, pushing the boundaries of thought while indulging in pleasures that defied the conventions of the day. Yet, in the end, the club's intellectual ambitions were overshadowed by its excesses. The pursuit of knowledge and the desire for intellectual freedom, while admirable, were ultimately drowned out by the club's indulgence in excess. This tension between intellectual pursuit and personal indulgence remains a central theme in our understanding of the Hellfire Club. It forces us to ask whether true intellectual and personal freedom can ever coexist without the risk of self-destruction. The members of the club sought to create a space for intellectual exploration, but their desire for personal freedom led them down a path of excess and moral decay. This, in turn, undermined the very ideals they had hoped to explore. Ultimately, the Hellfire Club's myth endures because it encapsulates the fundamental human struggle for autonomy, power, and intellectual freedom. It serves as both a symbol of liberation and a warning about the dangers of living without limitations. The story of the Hellfire Club reminds us that the pursuit of ultimate freedom, unrestrained by societal norms, is a seductive but perilous journey. It is a tale that continues to speak to our desires for rebellion, our fascination with power, and our ongoing struggle to balance personal liberty with the responsibilities we owe to one another and to society as a whole. The Hellfire Club may have disappeared, but the questions it raised about power, freedom, and moral responsibility remain as pertinent today as they were centuries ago. The myth of the Hellfire Club remains potent not just because of the hedonistic indulgences that defined it, but because it represents the timeless conflict between freedom and responsibility. The club's legacy reminds us that rebellion against societal norms is often seductive, particularly for those who hold power and privilege. Yet, it also reveals the inherent danger in breaking away from the systems that provide structure and order. The members of the Hellfire Club sought to liberate themselves from moral and societal constraints, but in doing so, they revealed the vulnerability that comes with unchecked freedom. Their actions, which initially felt like a triumph of personal autonomy, ultimately led to their undoing. In today's world, we continue to see this tension play out, as those in power are often tempted to escape the limits imposed by societal norms, only to face the repercussions of their actions later on. In many ways, the Hellfire Club represents an idealized version of rebellion, one in which the privileged can live freely, without the consequences that others face. The members of the club were able to craft a world for themselves, one where societal rules were bent or ignored, and where they could explore both intellectual and physical boundaries. This ability to live outside of conventional life is what makes the Hellfire Club so fascinating. It taps into the fantasy of a life unencumbered by laws, by morality, and by the expectations of others. But this very freedom also exposes the fragility of such a life. The club's downfall, brought on by scandal, public outrage, and the social backlash against its members, shows that no one, not even the wealthiest or most powerful, can live without consequence forever. The myth of the Hellfire Club continues to serve as a reminder that all actions, no matter how far removed from the eyes of society, eventually have repercussions. The modern fascination with secret societies and clandestine groups is an extension of this desire to glimpse behind the curtain of power and privilege. The Hellfire Club, with its mix of intellectualism and indulgence, is still seen as a prototype for these hidden, unaccountable spaces where the rules don't apply. In today's world, secretive organisations, whether they're political think tanks, corporate boards, or informal power networks, evoke a similar sense of intrigue. we continue to speculate about the actions and decisions of the wealthy and influential, wondering what takes place behind the closed doors where policies are shaped, deals are struck, and the fate of entire nations or industries is decided. The Hellfire Club, with its cloak of secrecy and its association with the elite, provides the perfect lens through which to examine the ongoing human fascination with power and privilege, and the lengths to which people will go to maintain that power. Yet, as much as the Hellfire Club serves as a symbol of defiance, it also speaks to the limits of rebellion. The club's members, despite their intellectual curiosity and philosophical discussions, ultimately indulged in excess in ways that were unsustainable. The pursuit of knowledge, when combined with hedonistic behaviour and the rejection of social norms, led them into territory that was both dangerous and self-destructive. The story of the Hellfire Club is a reminder that personal freedom, when pursued without limits, or without regard for its effects on others, can lead to moral decay. The club's intellectual exploration was tainted by its indulgence in excess, and the very rebellion that was supposed to free its members from societal constraints ultimately led to their downfall. This paradox, that absolute freedom can lead to self-destruction, remains a central theme of the Hellfire Club's legacy. In today's world, where the pursuit of personal autonomy and freedom is often celebrated, the story of the Hellfire Club forces us to consider the consequences of living outside the boundaries of society. The club's members were able to defy social norms, but they did so at a significant cost, one that, in the end, proved too great. In our own lives, we too are constantly balancing the desire for personal freedom with the need to live within the structures that allow society to function. As we push for more individual rights, more personal autonomy, and more freedom, we are reminded of the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility that the Hellfire Club story illustrates. The club's ultimate collapse, brought about by its members' inability to reconcile their indulgent behaviours with their intellectual pursuits, highlights a crucial point. Freedom without accountability is not true freedom, it is chaos. The Hellfire Club's narrative also reveals something about human nature itself, our insatiable desire for power, freedom, and knowledge. It shows us that these desires are not inherently destructive, but when they go unchecked, they can lead to unintended consequences. The club's members were not merely indulging in excess for the sake of pleasure. They were also seeking something deeper: intellectual freedom, the ability to question the structures that controlled their lives, and the chance to create a space where they could explore their ideas and desires without restriction. But the club's eventual downfall shows that even the most profound intellectual or philosophical pursuits can become tainted when they are divorced from any sense of morality or accountability. The Hellfire Club serves as a stark reminder that, when we pursue freedom, we must also be aware of the responsibilities that come with it. It teaches us that true freedom lies not in rejecting all constraints, but in understanding the limits and consequences of our actions. Today, the Hellfire Club's myth continues to offer lessons on the nature of power, freedom, and responsibility. The club's rebellion against authority, its quest for intellectual and personal autonomy, and its eventual collapse are all part of a narrative that speaks to the ongoing human struggle for self-determination. In a world where personal freedom is increasingly seen as an inalienable right, the Hellfire Club's story encourages us to reflect on the cost of that freedom and to consider the balance between our desires and the needs of the broader society. The club's rise and fall highlight the complexity of living in a world where the pursuit of ultimate freedom must be tempered by an understanding of the limits of that freedom. It is a cautionary tale that remains as relevant today as it was in the 18th century. The Hellfire Club's story is ultimately a reflection of the timeless struggle between personal freedom and societal constraint, a conflict that continues to shape our modern world in profound ways. Its members, in their pursuit of intellectual exploration and personal indulgence, challenged the very fabric of society's moral and political structures. They sought a space where they could be free from the constraints of religion, law, and societal expectations, a place where they could explore their ideas and desires without consequence. Yet, their rebellion also demonstrated the inherent danger in such unchecked freedom. The club's eventual collapse serves as a powerful reminder that absolute freedom, when taken too far, can lead not only to personal ruin, but to the unravelling of the very foundations that support society itself. This paradox, where the desire for liberation becomes its own undoing, is one of the central lessons that the Hellfire Club imparts, one that remains deeply relevant today. As we navigate our own complex relationship with freedom, the story of the Hellfire Club continues to echo. Today, we live in a time where the pursuit of individual rights and personal autonomy is more pronounced than ever. Social movements champion personal freedoms in all aspects of life, from politics to identity to the way we express ourselves in society. Yet, as the Hellfire Club's story reminds us, the pursuit of personal freedom without any regard for its consequences can be just as dangerous as living under the oppressive rule of authority. In a world where many seek liberation from the systems that govern us, the question remains, can we truly be free without responsibility? The Hellfire Club serves as both a cautionary tale and a challenge to the modern ideal of freedom, reminding us that it is not just the exercise of autonomy that matters, but how that autonomy is balanced with the social structures that keep us from descending into chaos. The Hellfire Club also highlights an important tension that persists in modern society, the tension between public morality and private indulgence. In today's world, the rich and powerful continue to operate in ways that, at times, seem to place them beyond the reach of social and legal accountability. From financial scandals to political corruption, there remains a sense that those at the top are insulated from the consequences of their actions. This dynamic mirrors the world of the Hellfire Club, where the elite were able to live outside the moral and legal constraints that governed the lives of the rest of society. However, as the Hellfire Club's eventual downfall reveals, even those who hold immense power are not immune from the backlash that comes from their actions being exposed. Today, the public's growing awareness of the unchecked power and privilege of elites continues to fuel discontent and calls for greater transparency and accountability. The Hellfire Club serves as an early example of how the consequences of privilege and secrecy can eventually catch up with those who believe they are beyond reproach. The secretive nature of the Hellfire Club, its ability to operate behind closed doors, hidden from the prying eyes of society, was one of the factors that made it so enticing to the public. The club's members, despite their wealth and influence, were able to retreat to a world that was largely inaccessible to ordinary people. This idea of an exclusive hidden world where the powerful can operate without oversight remains a central element of modern fascination with secret societies. Today, we continue to be intrigued by the idea of power brokers making deals behind closed doors, where the rules of transparency and public accountability do not apply. The Hellfire Club's myth captures this fascination perfectly. It embodies the human desire to look beyond the surface, to uncover the secrets of those in power, and to imagine what goes on in the hidden corners of society where rules are bent, broken, or altogether ignored. This modern fascination with secrecy, elite gatherings, and hidden worlds is not just about voyeurism. It speaks to a deeper anxiety about the concentration of power and the distance between those who hold influence and those who do not. The Hellfire Club's secret meetings, while grounded in a specific historical context, symbolize the broader unease many feel today about the opacity of the systems that govern our lives. Whether it's the financial elite, political leaders, or celebrities, there remains a persistent curiosity about how the powerful live, what they do behind closed doors, and what they know that the rest of society does not. The Hellfire Club's myth is a reflection of these anxieties, serving as both an object of intrigue and a symbol of the potential dangers of unchecked influence. Moreover, the Hellfire Club's pursuit of intellectual freedom, its desire to challenge conventional ideas and explore radical new ways of thinking, offers another dimension to its legacy. The club's members were not merely indulging in hedonism for its own sake, they were also engaging with ideas that questioned the very foundations of religion, politics, and morality. In a society that was deeply conservative and ruled by tradition, the Hellfire Club's intellectual rebellion represented a challenge to the status quo. Today, this desire for intellectual freedom continues to drive some of the most important movements and debates of our time, as society increasingly confronts issues of social justice, political reform, and personal identity. The Hellfire Club's intellectual subversion serves as a reminder of the power of challenging established norms and questioning the systems that govern us. However, as the club's eventual downfall shows, radical ideas are often met with resistance, and the pursuit of freedom can come at a significant cost. The Hellfire Club also serves as a reflection of the human desire to transcend the ordinary, to live a life that is unbound by the limitations of the everyday world. Its members sought to carve out a space for themselves where they could explore not only their most extreme desires, but also their most radical ideas. In many ways, this desire to transcend the mundane, to experience life in its most intense and unrestrained form, is something that continues to speak to us today. In an age where personal expression and freedom are highly valued, the Hellfire Club represents an early exploration of what it means to live authentically, to break free from the confines of conventional life, and to create a world where rules are bent to suit personal desires. But as the club's story demonstrates, such a world is fragile and cannot be sustained without consequence. The Hellfire Club's myth endures as a testament to the complexity of the human condition, our yearning for freedom, our thirst for power, and our vulnerability to the consequences of living without limits,